Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Ariana. I'm the Education Specialist with IPLSA, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. So if you have any questions regarding today's program or our other education programs, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm here to help. Today we have Tim Birch presenting on the Illinois Land Surveyor Act 2018 edition. We're very excited to have you speak with us today, so thank you, Tim, for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. This has been a kind of a baby of mine for the last couple of years, trying to get the new revisions up to a little more up to snuff with the way the typical surveyors doing things these days. And it's really too bad we have to have such rigid rules and things for our profession. But you know, this way it at least gives us an idea of where we need to be and how we should be doing our job. So just with that, go ahead and jump right into this. Come on, my intro. There we go. So yes, this is the Illinois Professional Land Surveyors Act of 1989, including the revisions that were passed in 2017 and took effect January 1, 2018. The purpose for being here today, besides just having to hammer this out and understand a little better what we're doing, we got to meet a requirement. And according to the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, this live webinar does meet the criteria of a live session for the 4 hours. So I guess we sit back, relax, and just try to figure things out. One thing I'll say right here now is that if we have questions as we go along, please type them in. Ariana's gonna get them to us as quickly and as efficiently as we can. We might as well attack them while the questions come up. So let's just plan on doing that. If you see something you want to ask a question about, because I'm assuming that there is several, if not most, attendees are from out of state and may not be familiar with the changes that have taken place over this past year. Because I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of Illinois resident surveyors that don't know that these even took place. So please ask questions and let's see how we can do today. All right, this was really what we want to cover is a bulk of what is the revisions to the act that took place this past January 1. First, a little bit about me. I am currently the Government Affairs Chair for the Illinois Professional Land Surveyors Association. Been the chair for, and at this point I don't even remember how long, and this was my carrying forward of these changes to get these updated. I'm also actually in my last year of the secretary of the National Society of Professional Surveyors. I will be running for vice president, and those ballots will be coming to the NSPS members at the 1st of December. I'm also on the board of directors for the NSPS Certified Survey Technicians. If you aren't aware of the program, please get familiar with it for our field and office technicians. It's a great program. It's a great test. It's a great way to gauge how good your employees are and to help them get better. It's good for the employers to gauge where things are at. It's good for the employee to gauge what they do know. I guess lastly, I'm also a contributing editor to GPS World Magazine. You may have seen I've got a column that comes out every other month on surveying topics that are GPS based. Try to make it light, try to make it relevant to what we do as professional surveyors using GNSS and emerging technology. So today, this is what we're going to concentrate on Statute 225, the Illinois Compiled Statutes, Section 330, and includes the 2018 revisions. This kind of gives you a timeline of what it took to put all of these together and the amount of time that, bottom line, legislation and the political world takes. We started talking about this well, at this point, it was 3 years ago, putting this stuff all together, kind of a wish list of what we thought was realistic to put in the for a revised statute, things that needed to be changed, things that needed to be updated. We worked through the chapters to try to figure out what would be good additions and subtractions to the act itself. So that itself took some time, just getting the word out to the chapters. I don't know how other states are. We've got some chapters that are very, very active in Illinois. We got some that meet very infrequently. So getting a buy-in and response from all the chapters took a little bit of time. So by the summer and fall of 2016, we knew that it was going to take some time to get this really hammered out. So we put together a small task force to analyze all of the questions that people had, suggestions for revisions, suggestions for deletions, and started putting things together. And we thought we came up with a pretty good list. So by the winter of 2017, we finalized everything and presented it to the Illinois Board of Direction to accept our changes as we saw fit. Thank goodness, passed unanimously. Everybody felt like they were pretty good changes, so we moved forward with it. So by February 17, we were fortunate enough to meet up with a couple of legislation sponsors in the House and the Senate of the Illinois legislature. So we were able to start that in the Illinois House. We did meet with IDFPR for a few wording, some wordsmithing, some legal considerations, legal determinations on some things, made a few changes. Those changes easily passed the House. And we were able to then take it to our Senate sponsor, and she was able to take it, run with it. Once again, went through, I think there was one person out of the East St. Louis area that voted no, and I guess it's come to be well known that he just votes no on a lot of things. So unanimous -1 was pretty good. So in June of 17 became the Public Act. August of 17 was signed by Governor Rauner, and therefore January 1 of 18 became law. This kind of gives you an idea of the timeline of way it has to go through the politics of things, and not to bore you or drag you down with the political side of this, but it is statute, and this gives you a little background on what it takes to get legislation through the House and the Senate to get it passed. Even as far as statutory things, it takes time. And the bad thing about this is that even as the government affairs chair, it's volunteer, and it does take time, and it takes a lot of effort to get these things done. I had a lot of great help, both from our association management team and my task force. Mike Filipski is a good friend of mine, helped out with this, and Tim Murphy, past president of IPLSA, also helped me with this. We did a bunch of late nights and a bunch of question and answers from a lot of people wanting to know where this was going. So that just gives you a snapshot of what it takes to take legislation from soup to nuts. So jumping into it, these are out of the sections that we're going to break them down. And I guess this would be as good time as any to just say, because continuing education is defined as 50 minutes equals 1 hour, the intent here is, if I'm just going to go ahead and roll straight through all of this. So by time definition, we should be finished up a little before noon. If you need to step away, step away. Potty breaks, drink breaks, snacks, whatever, go right ahead. I'm going to try to minimize the time that we need to do this, still meet the requirement. So just so you know, we'll go through these as quickly as necessary. Okay, so the synopsis of the changes. We were replacing quite a little bit of everything throughout this in various sections. Some sections stayed intact completely, and we'll even touch on those. And that's part of the reason of this seminar today, and basically trying to help explain, especially to the non-Illinois residents, non-Illinois people, why this is important, and it's relevant in 2018 versus an act that started back in the mid to late 80s. And a lot of things have changed. A lot of technology's changed. A lot of environmental and professional things have changed. So we'll touch on a few things. But I wanted to make changes concerning the practice that constitutes the practice of land surveying. One of the big changes, and we'll get into it a little bit later on towards the middle of that section, is somebody that qualifies for licensure, is a graduate of a baccalaureate curriculum, and has met certain requirements and passed the examinations of the fundamentals of surveying. Before this revision, it was a baccalaureate in a related science, and a related science only, in addition to a land surveying degree. The committees, the initial committee and then the task force felt that by limiting the education requirement to a bachelor's in a related science really held some people up. That we do have examples of people out there that have a Bachelor of Arts in history. And the committee and the task force felt as long as that person has a bachelor's from an accredited, approved scholastic source, as long as they also meet the criteria for related sciences and math and the 24 credit hours of land surveying classes, why preclude them? Just because somebody has a Bachelor of Arts versus a Bachelor of Science. Especially in the couple of cases that have come up in discussing this prior to making these changes, I'd be more than happy to talk to somebody and hire somebody that's got a Bachelor of Arts in history. History is a big part of what we do. So the committee and the task force felt that that was a reasonable revision to make to allow anybody with a bachelor's, as long as they meet the other criteria of the related sciences and math and the 24 credit hours. We'll get into some of that a little more later with some links to the rules as well as statute. And then we also made some changes to the minimum standards for enrollment as a survey intern and the length that a survey intern, formerly surveyor in training, you'll see these. Previously in Illinois, it was the surveyor in training license was only good for 10 years and was not renewable. So for someone to take that test and either for whatever reasons do not get their education in time in that 10 years, does not pass that test within 10 years, they're forced to go back and take that test again. A little bit unfair, considering there are other professions, namely engineer interns, that it does not expire. Bottom line, you still have to pass the LS test. You still have to pass the state specific. Chances are, if somebody goes that long and doesn't get through their LS in that time, there's bigger issues than just running out of time. So we decided to eliminate that time limit on the surveyor intern license as well. You'll see as we go through that the revisions are going to appear in bold black, and I've tried to go back through and delete everything that was deleted in a bold blue with a strike through, so you'll kind of get a differentiation of what was there before and why we made some changes in a few cases. Here's the short titles to the first 5, give you kind of an idea. We'll talk about public policy and short title. We'll get into these a little more specific, but this is what we're going through in this first section. Section 1, Declaration of Public Policy. And we'll touch on this for a little bit and get heavier into the change a little bit further in Section 5. But bottom line, the practice of land surveying in the state of Illinois is hereby declared to affect the public health, safety, and welfare, and to be subject to regulation and control in the public interest. Bottom line, public interest. This is what this is all about. This is why it's relevant now. It is further declared that the determination and physical protraction of land boundaries, here's where we absolutely wanted to make this change, using appropriate application of boundary law principles, together with the attendant preparation of legal descriptions and plats, which bear witness for posterity to chronicle the acts and wishes of landowners throughout the state, is a matter of public interest and concern. Once again, public interest and concern. We are there as stewards for the land on behalf of clients and landowners, bottom line. Therefore, it is in the public interest that the practice of land surveying, as defined by this act, merit and receive the confidence of the public, and that the only qualified persons be authorized to practice land surveying in the state of Illinois. This act shall be liberally construed to best carry out this purpose. So, what does this mean? We'll carry through into a couple other sections. Bottom line is, this is the Professional Surveyor Act of 1989, and with the current revisions. It is policy of the Illinois compiled statutes to leave the title, short titles, as the original bill as provided and passed. Anything here further are revisions to that original and doesn't retitle anything. Section 3, this act doesn't prohibit people licensed in the state under any other act from engaging in this practice. And what we'll get a little bit further into later, the big thing there is for surveyors is topography, and we'll talk about that with engineers. We'll run through some definitions pretty quickly here. Other than the one, department is what it is, secretary and board. Let's talk about direct supervision and control for a moment. Means the personal review by a licensed land surveyor of each survey, including but not limited to procurement, research, field work, calculations, preparations of legal descriptions and plats. I've had a lot of questions about this and what truly means direct supervision. I guess it just depends on how you want to look at it as far as your own license. A good friend of mine, a longtime NSPS person, every time he's ever gotten up to speak, this is one thing he always shares, and I've echoed this the last couple of years myself because it is so true. That when we send that crew out, let's go beyond the $50,000 truck, the $30,000 robot, the $20,000, $40,000, $60,000 GPS or laser scanner, or now UAVs. You're also handing him or her your professional license, your professional liability, your reputation, basically your livelihood. So direct supervision and control, bottom line, comes down to what are you confident in tasking that person with to go out and do on your behalf, whether it be boundaries, whether it be a topographic survey, whether it be construction layout, whatever that may be. If you're not confident in that person under your direct supervision and control to go do that, to where could jeopardize your license, could jeopardize your business, could jeopardize your professional standing, then you probably should take a step back and reevaluate how good is this person. That's where we're, in my opinion, and this is my opinion only, that this is where we're losing a little bit with the I'll say the spreading out of the profession, in that it's different now than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. We aren't having the mentoring. We're not having the one-on-one educational experiences. I mean, early in my career, my education experience was on the dumb end of a chain for quite a while. Then to the front end of the chain, then to the instrument, always under the direction of a qualified party chief and or a professional land surveyor. Now we're sending people out with uh, uh, with one-man robotic total stations, with GPS, uh, and really only communicating by phone, by emails, by text. That there's a lot of stuff that it we're missing out on mentoring opportunities, and bottom line is that is going to affect our professional licensure. It's going to affect our professional reputation. So to kind of put a bow on D is, what does direct supervision and control mean to you? I know what it says. I know what it I know what it I think what it means. But at bottom line, it's going to come down to what it means to you. Responsible charge, again, means that individual that you've placed in charge of this stuff. What does it mean to be in responsible charge? Once again, I think it's going to depend on each one of us and the differences that each one of us feels that it is. Design professional is the land surveyor, architect, structural engineer, professional engineer, licensed. Professional land surveyor, any person licensed under this act, bottom line. One of the changes you'll see throughout this this document and throughout the statute itself is the change from land surveyor in training to surveyor intern. In putting together this statute, what we found was that a majority of the states have went to the term surveyor intern, and NCWS, part of their model law and their model rules, recognizes this mid-step to licensure as a surveyor intern. So what you'll see throughout here is the change from, and I've been involved with this thing for 3 years now, and I'm still stuck on SIT. It is survey intern, and that's the term that we're going to use moving forward. Land surveying experience, we'll get into some of that in section 5. Address of record is exactly that. Who are you on record with the department? Where they can track you down in case somebody wants to make a complaint against you. Letter K, standard of care. This is one that was one that I carried the torch for, because I've seen this in a lot of other professions and a lot of their kind of creeds and canons. Bottom line is it's kind of an unwritten thing anyway, but I really thought it would be beneficial to have it in there, if nothing else, as a subtle reminder to us what we're doing, what standard of care we should be following. Means the use of the same degree of knowledge, skill, and ability as an ordinarily careful and reasonable personal land surveyor would exercise under similar circumstances. The example I have been using for the last 2 years in promoting this section, and once it's implemented and people ask, what the heck is it? Are you extending the surveyor liability? No, we're not. Bottom line is that standard of care, we each take under a standard of care when we go out and do each of these jobs. Surveying is obviously very broad. I don't need to tell everybody here that. So how, in the broad scheme of all of the surveying tasks, what are you versed in? What are you trained in? What are you considered an expert in? I know a little bit about some things. I don't know a lot about other things. Geodesy. I know enough about geodesy to get myself in trouble. So would I ever go out and do a geodetic survey for control, maybe, but for actual geodesy, no. There are people that are out doing land title surveys that don't understand title, and we'll get into that a little bit more with the boundary law principles as well. Bottom line is it's getting into tasks and environments that are beyond your expertise. And the example I've been giving for the last 2 years is Illinois and how diverse Illinois is. And it's diverse in a matter of 100 miles. That you go to anywhere 100 miles outside of Chicago, it's rural, it's sectionalized land. We have an Indian boundary through part of it southwest of Illinois. That there are some surveyors that are much more versed in dealing with those legal descriptions than others, versus somebody coming into the city of Chicago and looking for scratches on the sidewalks, recognizing occupation, recognizing the nuances of downtown Chicago. I've got several examples of I'll call rural surveyors, non-Chicago surveyors that have come to Chicago, mostly under the survey brokers, and have performed surveys in downtown Chicago that have created messes. Bottom line is that's beyond their expertise. That is beyond their knowledge base, and therefore exceeds the standard of care that they are capable of providing that. And I'll put the same burden on the Chicago surveyors, the ones that know every lot and block, that know every cut cross, and know all that stuff. Yet you take them 100, 150 miles out and do a sectionalized survey and breaking down a section and finding stones. It's beyond their level of expertise. So bottom line is standard of care, and it's not cut and dried. I can say this is somebody's standard of care. That is something that's in your own mind. It's like ethics. I'll know ethics when I see it, when I smell it, when I feel it. Well, I know what my standard of care is, and I know what it needs to be done. Bottom line is it's doing something, if you're in an area that you're unfamiliar with, but still being able to perform that survey, provide a service and a product that meets that standard of care for that area, for that environment. So that was the reason we wanted to put that in. I wanted to put that in because basically, it's like I said, it's putting just a subtle reminder that just because you have a land surveying license, I have a tendency to think of this and not trying to compare ourselves to engineers, heaven forbid. But if you have your PE is usually for something specific, whether it's civil, mechanical, electrical, whatever. Just because you have your PE doesn't mean it covers you for every bit of engineering. Just because you have your land surveyor license doesn't mean it covers you for every possible task in land surveying. So that's the reason we wanted to put that in there. All right, then we get into some of the bulk of the changes that we wanted to put in here. There is a couple of things here and that we want to talk about as far as establishing means performing an original survey. And there is issues that what is the difference between an original survey and a retracement survey? Bottom line is an original survey establishes boundary lines within an original division of tract of land, which is theretofore existed as one unit or parcel, and described and monumenting a line or lines of a parcel or tract of land on the ground for a first time. An original surveyor is the creator of one or more new boundary lines. So whenever you do that subdivision, that is an original survey. That makes you the original surveyor. Now to go then follow behind that and retrace a lot in the survey or in the subdivision, or retracing an existing parcel. That goes to the next one. Reestablishing or locating means performing a retracement survey. You're not establishing new lines. You're not establishing new deeds. That is, you're retracing. You are following in the footsteps. You're supposed to figure out where that surveyor, how they came about that original tract, locate those boundary lines and corners. And the retracement survey isn't intended to ever set new corners or lines or correct an original survey. There are other methods of going about doing that. So that was one thing that the task force really felt strongly about including in here now, is establishing and reestablishing surveys, creation of an original survey, creation of a retracement survey, because they are two different operations. They're two distinct tasks that are done by the surveyor in either planting that flag in the ground as an original survey as a new parcel, or retracing a survey. You're following somebody that has already created that survey. So that was the reason those were put in there. Letter N, which we'll talk about in much greater detail. Boundary law principles means applying the decisions, results, and findings of land boundary cases that concern the establishment of boundary lines and corners. This one is the biggest question mark for a lot of people. And I think, unfortunately, it has raised the question for a lot of surveyors, who am I? What do I do? Where the hell does law come into play with all of this? You give me the deed, I survey the deed, and that's what I do. Well, there's much more to it than just being a deed surveyor, or in my opinion, a fence line surveyor. What we have to realize are the other issues, the law issues that take precedent in what we do, and that a lot of times that we do not take in consideration. Where a lot of this started was, this goes back even to the 2011 ALTA standard. That in that standard was the first time it established that, depending on the jurisdiction, the surveyor needed to apply applicable boundary law principles. And for a lot of people, they glossed over that, didn't see it, didn't recognize it in the 2011 standard, stayed in the 2016 standard, and now it's being updated in state statute, and people are going, well, what does that mean? Well, a boundary is defined as a separation, natural or artificial, that marks the confines or the line of division between two contiguous the contiguity of properties. So bottom line is, it's whatever has been used, whether it's monuments, whether it's been a court decision to decide what two parcels are. And for this section, when we were putting this together, we went back to one of the original authors of the ALTA standard in 2011 and continuing in 16. Some people may be familiar with him, a gentleman by the name of Dick Bales. He's with Chicago Title. He's also a main player in American Land Title Association. Is on the committee that helps create, along with Gary Kent with NSPS, the ALTA standards. Dick, as a title examiner and as an attorney, was the one that really wanted to push forward the boundary law principles way back in 2010, 2011, which makes a lot of sense, because there are a lot of court cases. There are literally well over a century of court cases that have determined boundaries that we need to follow precedent on. So going back to some of his text that I refer to quite often in trying to help explain this, his first question was, what is the boundary line between two parcels? It's a question of law. In his first example, a boundary line between two people's property may be determined by adverse possession. That's determined by the court of law. In another example, a boundary line between two people's property may be determined by a doctrine of boundary by acquiescence. Once again, determination of law. Third example, boundary line between two properties is determined by a recorded plat of subdivision. Sometimes that has to get something done like that, has to go through the court system to be able to get determinations on those boundary lines, and then be established as far as a recorded plat. And his rule number 2 is, where the boundary line is located is a question of fact. So based upon either natural or artificial monuments, like he said earlier. That marks and defines what that boundary is. This is something else that we started approaching back in 2011 ourselves in Illinois. We worked with Jeff Lucas, the Northeast chapter of the Illinois Professional Land Surveyors, worked with Jeff Lucas to put together the Illinois Boundary Law Book. And something that Jeff brought up and was well throughout the book itself was this was a statement that he wrote that I rely on heavily a lot. There exists a division in the land surveying community over the surveyor's duties and responsibilities relative to property boundaries. This division and the resulting debate have separated land surveyors into two camps. The heart of the matter is whether surveyors are professionals or technicians. One camp insists that the land surveyor's only duty and responsibility to his or her client, and that the only function of the surveyor is to locate boundaries in accordance with the measurements in a client's deed, show the results, and in essence, let the chips fall where they may. Issues related to property law and the interpretation of property law are matters best left to the legal community. The other camp sees the surveyor's duties and responsibilities as substantially broader. Recognizing that the measurements in the client's deed may or may not accurately reflect the true boundary line between the client and the client's neighbor, the second camp takes the position that the surveyor's duty is to locate the true property boundary line between two coterminous landowners. This requires a proper reading of the client's deed in light of surrounding circumstances and in consideration of eccentric evidence outside the deed, especially in the face of ambiguities and when an attempt is made to locate the boundary on the ground. So for a lot of surveyors, unfortunately, that we've come across in talking about that, says, yep, I'm first camp. Give me the deed, I'm going to survey the deed. That was what the intent of the surveyor was. That was following in their footsteps. But I think we can all sit here and say we've all come across deeds that have just not worked, that there are ambiguities in deeds, that there are ambiguities in the deeds versus what is physically in the field and what has been followed. So by introducing into statute and perpetuating the boundary law principles effect is providing the surveyor with more ammunition to say, I've got to go back and I've got to look at this from a different perspective. I've got to do more research on the adjacent deeds. I have to go back and look at case law that can apply to this particular situation because the deed doesn't match the physical boundaries, doesn't match the conditions, doesn't match the differences in what the two adjoining landowners feel that they own. So by doing that, we've really kind of, I won't say forced that upon the surveyor. It's making the Illinois surveyor more aware of this is part of your duty. This is part of what you're supposed to do in providing an accurate land survey for your client, not just find the four corners, matches the deed, flag them up, and go. There aren't, and I understand that most of our surveys are that way. That's great. The less problems, the better. But there are times when we come across stuff that we do have ambiguity and we do have to approach it. That is the.
I have a question.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Actually, we've got two.
Yes.
So I'll start with the first one. In moving to new surveying areas with your business, what have you done to ensure standard of care is met? Well,
for me, standard of care, if you were going to expand your business into either other technologies and or other regions, that's part of your duty, is to become educated on that technology, make sure that what you're putting out is an acceptable solution using that technology. Unfortunately, that was part of the problem with GPS, and not to necessarily throw our manufacturers and salesmen under the bus, but so many people bought GPS and without really knowing how it works, knowing what to check. It's push this button, do this, and you get answers. It's the surveyor's duty to understand what we're doing with that technology. So until I'm ready to provide a new service, and I'll give you a simple example. We've embraced UAVs in our business, and until we did a substantial amount of testing and ground truthing the data, ground truthing the photos, we did not produce one plat, one exhibit, one piece of documentation that had any aerial information on it until I was satisfied, we were satisfied that this was meeting the industry standards and was meeting the needs of the client because of the change in technology. So that's the one I say in one realm. The other part is when you're expanding your business into other areas. We are based in the Chicago area. For us to go open a Springfield, Illinois office, I mean, I do know what it's like. I grew up in Central Illinois. I know how different surveying is down there, and I'm familiar with it. But for us as a company to take somebody out of here that's never surveyed in the rural community in that type of situation, that's not considering the standard of care. You have to put the right person in that place to be able to oversee that falls within their standard of care, to be able to do what's right. So that's the two ways I look at it. Hopefully that answers the question. That bottom line, I mean, like I said earlier, like ethics, you kind of know it when you see it, feel it. If you feel like you're doing it within your standard of care, there's no black and white, but realize that there are other people, other technologies that you're being judged against. That it has to be weighed out against. Number two.
Okay, and the second one that's come through. If surveyors were not the only ones allowed to offer legal descriptions until recent years, how can a surveyor be in Camp 1?
Well, I guess here's one of those things, and I completely agree that yes, it was only until really recently that we've said, kind of beat our fist on the table and said, attorneys, no, you can't write legal descriptions. You're not versed and educated in land boundaries, land systems. Bottom line is, it still doesn't preclude attorneys from writing them. I think we see them still every day. I mean, bottom line is that we have to realize what has been laid out there previously before us, and realize that maybe there is a lot of surveys out there that the legal descriptions were done based upon an attorney's interpretation, and then the surveyor followed up with that and either matched it verbatim, and a lot of times did, erroneous or not. So unfortunately, that these past sins are forcing us to do more work, and it's forcing us to make sure that we do more research on the adjoiners, that we do more diligent search, both physically in the field and in the recorder's offices, to get evidence from adjacent landowners, to get testimony of what things were like at what point in time. Yeah, unfortunately, the table's been set because of these past sins, that it's made work for us. So therefore, if we just simply stick by the deed, we might just be perpetuating these errors. And so we need to make sure that we uncover everything we can possibly uncover, to turn over every rock, talk to everybody we possibly can. Now, something, I just had this conversation this last week with a group of surveyors. Unfortunately, in doing all this due diligence, we've got an issue in today's society. We are time-driven, budget-driven, and so unfortunately, we do have a group of surveyors that the amount of their research and discovery is limited by, in their minds, by the amount of budget, amount of time, amount of deadlines. Well, that once again, this comes down to ethics and standard of care. And I'm not going to play judge and jury here. It's up to each individual to decide the product I'm turning out. Have I done my due diligence, regardless of time frames, regardless of budgets, regardless of any other constraints? Trying to make sure that what we've uncovered as far as evidence, both legal, meaning descriptions, meaning plats, physical, anything we've done in the field, meaning talking to anybody, getting that testimony, and any kind of court cases that may help with helping establish some precedent here. It's up to each of us to decide what that final product is. I would love to say, with my rose-colored glasses in a perfect world, that we spend as much time as necessary on every survey and we make money on every surveyor, and we all know that's not true in any shape or form. But bottom line is that going back to part of our initial call was to protect the public. It's up to each of us to decide what makes the most sense and where do you draw that line on what you do as far as an end product. Hopefully that answers the question. We okay then? Can we go ahead and move on?
Yeah, I think we can move on. No more questions have come through.
Okay, very good. Very good. I'm trying to remember, let's go ahead and we're actually doing well on time. So I got a couple of quick points more on boundary law principles that I think really that make specific sense, especially in Illinois. Part of what Dick Bales has put together, he's put together almost a little checklist of what are the principles of Illinois boundary law. And so one thing he says is consider the following examples. With conflicting descriptions or calls, there are a hierarchy of elements. I think we've all seen these all, and I've got it pinned to my board here, my rules of construction. Monuments, courses and distances, quantities and areas. Not in that order, this is his list. And depending on where you're at in various states, there are various orders. Natural objects as far as monuments, artificial objects as far as monuments, courses, distances, quantities of area. Coordinates are starting to play into this quite a bit. And it's going to become more prevalent as we move forward with technology, and we can get into that a little bit later. One thing he does say is, a question he does ask, Dick does ask when he does these presentations, and I ask too, is what is a boundary line? Well, a boundary line is the line that defines the ownership of land. It may or may not be coincident with the record title line. Bottom line. So if you're doing that survey based upon the deed, that's going to conflict with what you're finding as far as monumentation in the field. And bottom line is we've got to evaluate all that evidence and make a determination from there. What is not boundary law? Now there are some things to consider here that in reviewing all of your legal descriptions, reviewing all your deeds, all of these documents. The one big thing that will stand out that you have to be able to make a decision, and it's on a case-by-case basis, are clerical errors, are Scrivener's errors. What are errors in legal descriptions that are just so blatantly bad that it makes it makes so much ambiguity that you can't, it's flipping a coin, and there could be 1, 2, 3 different versions of what could come out of it. So that itself is not boundary law. Those errors, omissions, Scrivener's errors, have to be decided in the field. They have to go back chain of title and see what made sense the first available time before that error was made. Let's see. And a lot of this is also going to come back to with boundary law principles in helping establish junior and senior rights. There's a lot of times that we've seen issues where it's one 50-foot lot is split in half. Well, one is the east half of lot X, and then the other half is the west 25 feet of lot X. Okay, well, which one holds when you go out and survey that lot and it's actually 51 feet wide? Once again, it comes back to junior senior rights as well, and that's part of the boundary law principles, in that we have to decide which one took precedent, which one took place first, which one had the first rights to that. For somebody to just go out there with the deed and say, I'm surveying the east half of lot X and it's 50 feet wide per plat, this is where we're coming up with a lot of our pin cushions. This is where, nope, deed says it's half of the 25. I come up with a 50-foot lot, I split it in half, and that's what it is. It's funny to talk to other professionals of other professions, and occasionally the whole pincushion thing will come up, and I'm glad that other professions aren't as aware of the pincushion effect nearly as much as we are ourselves, because it's interesting. It's not a laughing matter, but you have to laugh about it, that we're arguing over a tenth, 2/10, various things that and people are willing to set a new iron over a tenth or two, and not either, just if they don't agree with it, just show it as being off. It's amazing to me that that comes back to surveying the deed and surveying the legal description. That's what it says. That's in black and white. That nothing's going to change. So we've got to stick to that. So I think we're going to be, for now, we'll get out of the boundary law principles. I've beat that to death for you. So if there's no other questions, I'll go ahead and we can move on. Now let's get into the practice itself. Any person who practices in Illinois as a professional land surveyor who renders, offers to render, or holds him or herself out as able to render or perform any service, the adequate performance which involves the special knowledge of the art and application of the principles of the accurate and precise measurement of length, angle, elevation or volume, mathematics, the related physical and applied sciences, and the relevant requirements of applicable boundary law principles, and performed with the appropriate standard of care, all of which are required by education, training, experience, and examination. Any one or a combination of the following practices constitutes the practice of land surveying, and we'll get into those. Bottom line is, and this is one reason we added those lines in black, that these are things that need to be injected back into our definition. This is who we are. This is what we do. And we have to be able to incorporate the appropriate and applicable boundary law. And we have to be able to say without any hesitation that survey I went and did, I was qualified to do. I followed the local standard of care. I was using the appropriate technology in the appropriate manner with the appropriate precisions and tolerances. So often we have surveyors crisscrossing not just the state areas, the country, and they get out of their comfort zone. That if you're not not necessarily qualified, if you're not comfortable providing construction layout on a 20-story building, then don't do it. If you're not comfortable providing a hydrographic survey with a fathometer, don't do it. Bottom line is, stay within your comfort zone, stay within your body of knowledge. If it's something you want to end up doing, then study it. Go to school, take classes, do whatever. Find a practitioner that will help you. Study it. figure out how to do it. Don't just buy the technology and say, yep, we can go do this. Don't just go into an area and say, I'm a surveyor, so therefore I can survey Michigan Avenue. That's the big thing, and that's one reason we wanted to make sure that this definition, whether people see it or not, this is what we're judged by. So, and what I tell my staff, our field crews, I've told people throughout my career, because this is what's been impressed upon me from my bosses, my mentors. Unfortunately, in the job we're in, we have to treat every project, every job, every client like it could end up in court. And unfortunately, that's a reality. So what is the court going to look at when you're brought up to the stand to defend your work? First thing the court's going to look at, first thing a prosecutor is going to look at is the practice of land surveying defined. Where have you been deficient in that practice? Where have you not met your responsibilities as the professional land surveyor? So part of it is knowing what your responsibilities are. And that's part of the reason we do continuing education. Hopefully we go back over some of these things and things sink in a little bit. But bottom line, it's to reinforce what we know about our abilities and what we can do as a licensed professional and what we can't do. So bottom line is we have to have our comfort levels. We have to have our strengths and weaknesses. And this is one reason we have to define these, because if you're on the stand and you're being grilled from the prosecutor or even the defense attorney, what do you know, Mr. Birch? Well, I feel like I use the appropriate boundary law principles based upon this, and this. I use the appropriate standard of care because I have knowledge of this area, because I have experience in this area, whether it is environmental area, whether it's the technological area. I can do this. Not, oh well, yeah, we bought that GPS last week, and yeah, I'm not quite sure how it works, but the salesman told me how to push this button, and this is my location. It's having a comfort level with what you're doing. So, as a big preamble to the practice defined, this is a big part of it. Okay, moving on. The bread and butter: establishing, reestablishing, locating, defining, and making and monumenting land boundaries or title or real property lines, and the platting of lands and subdivisions. I would hope that 90%, 95% of the people that are on here, this is the biggest proportion of your work. That's what we do as surveyors. That's a big chunk of it, and not the rest of it withstanding. And we'll get into the rest of the duties of the surveyor. But this is what the public thinks about surveying. This is who we are. We're the ones that, yes, we're out on the side of the road taking pictures with our camera, but we're establishing and reestablishing those boundaries. If I need to know where my property is for some god-awful reason, I call the surveyor. If I want to put up a fence and the city says I need a survey, well, I call the surveyor. He or she is going to tell me where my properties are. So that's obviously the big one. That one's been the corner post since the beginning of these statutes. Next one we did change up a little bit, changing it from determining to establishing. We're determining. It's established. It's already established there. We're determining the area volume of any portion of the Earth's surface, subsurface, or airspace in respect to boundary lines. That's the big key here, and that's where we'll get back into that in just a second. Determine the configuration or contours of any portion of the Earth's surface, subsurface, or airspace, or location of fixed objects thereon, except as performed by photogrammetric methods. Here's where we added it because there is a significant certification out there by ASPRS, and there's going to be future ones too, especially as more and more people get into the UAV sector. If somebody gets their certification through ASPRS, that's a very thorough certification. That's in the states where there isn't a photogrammetry license, that is literally the equivalent, and that needs to be the exception to our rule. Or except when the level of accuracy is required is less than the level of accuracy required by National Society of Professional Surveyors model standards and practice. And that is on the NSPS website. That is listed. And actually it's getting ready to possibly go through some revisions because of the accuracy that a lot of the equipment is coming up with is so much better than it used to be with planimeters and stereoscopes and older technology. NSPS is actually looking to update and make that more relevant to the technology that's there now. I want to revisit this very quickly because we're seeing this every day all across the web, all these UAV companies that are popping out saying, let us fly your site, let us fly your mine, let us fly your stockpiles. And you know what? At first it was, well, wait a second, they're infringing in our work. Well, no, they're not. As long as they are not doing anything that goes back to showing the relationship of what they're measuring to a property line, they're not making that statement that this stockpile of CA6 is 100 feet off this east property line. There's nothing precluding anyone from being hired to determine a volume of that, of whatever they're trying to measure, whether it is a gravel pit, whether it's a mining operation, stockpiles, what have you. There's a lot of that going on. What bothers me is there are websites out there with the UAV companies saying, eliminate costly land surveys. That itself is not right. Because I would question, I mean, myself being in this business, having done it conventionally for many years and seeing how advantageous the UAVs are now, but still knowing the science and the mathematics behind it, and not just collect the data, throw it in a computer, press the button, spits out a 10 and go, yep, here's my volume. There are checks to be made. There are things to be known that we as surveyors know these things because this is what we practice. This is what we have been educated to do, and not just bought a $1,500 UAV and a $3,000 piece of software. So I do have issues with some of that, but there's nothing that precludes them from doing that. Stating that they can do it better than us, that's a little slanderous in my opinion. Nothing that I think you can go after them for. So when you do see these companies that are doing these things, as long as they've got their pilot's license, their FAA 107, it's what is it? Caveat emptor, buyer beware. If a mining operation is hiring someone to do these surveys and give them volumes, buyer beware. If they can do it and it's satisfactory to that client's need, great. Otherwise, it's totally up to them on what they end up getting out of it. All right. Preparing descriptions for the determination of title or real property rights to any portion or volume of the Earth's surface, subsurface airspace involving lengths and direction of boundary lines, areas, platted parcels, and contours of the Earth's surface, subsurface airspace. Preparing descriptions. Now notice that it doesn't say we are the only ones that can. The attorneys, unfortunately, their lobby and the legal counsel of the department wouldn't allow us to put that in because apparently we can't be precluded from allowing anybody to do that. However, it should be precluded if it comes down to conveyance of land. If somebody just needs a description of what they own, that's one thing. If they need an area of a particular pasture or what have you, that's fine. I mean, no, it's not, but it is what it is. when it comes down to conveyance, that's where the line should be drawn. And unfortunately, I mean, we've kind of put our line in the sand. This is our duty. And unfortunately, there are attorneys out there that still take it upon themselves to write the legals. And unfortunately, we just do not have the authority right now to stop that. As much as I wish we could, like I said, we would try. We're trying to write that into this, and just something that would not be accepted by the department. So we left it out. But bottom line, this is a good definition of what the legal description process is and how it's to be done under the definitions of the practice of land surveying. Item D, labeling, designating, preparing. There really wasn't any place that we ever said we were drafting something or otherwise identifying legal lines or land title lines of the U.S. rectangular system or any subdivision thereof on any plat, map, exhibit, photograph, photographic composite, or mosaic or photographic map of any portions of the Earth's surface for the purpose of recording and amending the same by the issuance of a certificate of correction in the office of recorder of any county. Okay, two pieces here. I'll take the small one first. Here is the problem that we're running into that I imagine everyone on this webinar has run into. We've got a cool tool out there now called GIS. And a lot of counties, municipalities, other governmental agencies, even some private firms have their own GIS. It's been in my experience, especially on the municipal and county side, while it's a good tool for the community and the surveyor, it has caused, right or wrong, it's caused more heartache. And while some will argue it's actually created business for the surveyor, and maybe that's true in some cases, for the most part, it's creating trouble that wasn't there before. And because these GIS these maps are put together with parcel lines that aren't perfectly geo-referenced to the photos, to the monumentation that exists out in the field. I can't tell you the number of times we get calls. Well, the county GIS shows the line going through my neighbor's garage, and if he's on my property, I want to fix this. And then you go out there, you show them the survey, and it's just bad GIS lines. So bottom line is there is times when I mean most if not all counties and municipalities say at the bottom, this doesn't represent a survey. Some even say consult a land surveyor for the true boundary locations. So often it gets overlooked, and there are engineers, planners, architects that put these things together, that download these parcel maps and start throwing these composites together and saying, right away line of Main Street, east line of property, what have you. Bottom line is it's creating a lot of headache, a lot of problems with people. And while this won't stop that from happening, this is our hammer to go back to these types of entities that are putting these maps together and saying, listen, you're not qualified to make that determination, to call out that line as such. Leave it off. Don't say anything about it. Stay silent on it. If you want to put together and throw parcel lines from a GIS, go ahead, but don't label them. You can't label them because it's representing something that it's not. So, and then the second part of this section, the big change, the amending the same by issuance of a certificate of correction. I don't know how many on the webinar are actually familiar with Illinois certificate of correction and that whole process. Certificate of correction has existed in Illinois for many years. Funny thing is, it doesn't exist in legal terms in statute. We've had certificate of corrections filed for scrivener's errors for subdivisions for, like I said, many years. But it technically doesn't exist in the eyes of the law. Various versions of Black's Law Dictionary state it as the ability to correct one's own work, but it doesn't exist. We decided to include this, and being able to give the surveyor the opportunity to amend their work and finally naming a certificate of correction. Now, what's going to happen is we will put them in the rules, the administrative rules, what can and cannot be placed in a certificate of correction. We'll get into the administrative rules here in a little bit. But unfortunately, we've had to go this route because of all of the requests that the surveyors have gotten over the years for certificates of correction for non-survey related items. I mean, it's one thing if I label a lot 100 feet wide and it should be 120 feet wide due to a last minute revision or whatever. I mean, there are scrivener's errors. There are true scrivener's errors. But there are times when the municipality will come back after recording and say, oh, well, we need to change the building setback lines. We've decided not to make it 30-foot setbacks. We need to be 35-foot setbacks. Or they've decided, well, we no longer want this to be Main Street. We want this to be Jones Street. There's been several, and changing easements and adding easements. That is not a certificate of correction. We can amend a plat that way and then re-record the entire plat if that's the choosing of the municipality. But the certificate of correction is to correct the scrivener's errors, not to revise anything. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to solidify that list of things that will be covered under certificate of correction under our administrative rules, and those are trying to get finalized and hopefully submitted at the first of the year, and we'll get them passed right after the first of the year. But that was the whole laying the groundwork there in item D of the issuance of a certificate of correction, because it never existed anywhere else. And while it was a legal term, it was never anything that was recognized in statute anywhere, especially in the surveying world. So that was just to give you a little taste of what's to come as far as why that was included there. All right. Item E is a biggie with several different things. So let's just roll through this quickly and efficiently. The actor
Hey, Tim, we've got a question.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Colorado has language that states anyone preparing a legal description shall provide their name and address. I guess maybe that's more of a statement than a question. I'm not sure.
I like that. I do like that. I guess the question I would throw back to it is, yeah, okay, sure, we're providing a name and address. I'm just wondering where that's gonna, if that needs to go on, if it's being part of a deed, anything that would be used for a conveyance down the line, especially if it's a non-surveyor. I guess that would be my question. I like that. I mean, hopefully, typically that the legal descriptions that are being provided, and I let me back up a second. I do like that in the fact that how often surveyors, at least in my office and the ones I know, how often we're requested by attorneys to provide legal descriptions, and then they get put into documents that have no reference to the surveyor that created that legal whatsoever. So, you know what? I thank you, Colorado. I like that. I'm going to write that down, and because I think that's something that could definitely be added, or at least considered for future. Let's see, added name and address to legal description. I like that. See, now that's the whole purpose of having these types of interactions. I'm learning stuff too. That's the whole beauty of this thing. Add name and address to legal. Thank you, Colorado. That will definitely be going on a topic list for follow-up revisions. So All right, Ariana, anything else?
Looks like we just had one more comment. Even a non-surveyor description would allow the tracking of peril evidence.
I guess it would depend, yes. I mean, it is possible, don't get me wrong. It is possible. I guess it just depends on the level of competency that that person that's writing it would have. If somebody is following old legals that might not necessarily know exactly what they're looking at, know exactly what they're retracing in putting together this new legal description. I got to be honest. I've worked with good attorneys and I've worked with horrible attorneys. Some of them were perfectly fine in what they were creating, and a good attorney will also say, Tim, here, write this for me because this one's over my head. Whereas bad attorneys just go ahead and plow through it anyway. So yes, I do agree that there can be legal descriptions written by others, non-surveyors, but the likelihood, I mean, I guess it's like me diagnosing a headache. What is it? What's the cause of it? Is it stress? Is it environmental? Whatever. Maybe a brain tumor, and I can't tell it, but we'll see.
We did have one more question come through.
Sure.
How can entities require a surveyor to create a meets and bounds legal descriptions for parcels that are lots within subdivisions for ALTA surveys?
Oh, that's always a good one, because my short answer is they can't. Part of the standard, the land title standard says you're using the legal description of record for the basis of the survey. Unfortunately, what we've come down to on the clients that have absolutely pushed back on those are we've added a different section on a plat or a separate document that says there's the legal description of record, also known as and done a meets and bounds. And hopefully your relationship with the client is good enough, because that, for me, that's an expensive legal description, because it's ludicrous that you're even asking me that question. I mean, I do get it. They're trying to understand, but so many don't understand meets and bounds to start with. So lot 1 in Jones subdivision is a lot easier than distance and bearing, whatever. Land title survey says the survey is based upon record title. If you want to put a separate section on your plat, otherwise known as that's, and Gary Kent will tell you that's acceptable. Preferably do it on a separate document, separate sheet of paper, and say this is the equivalent of that. That's how we get around it. Probably 75% of them, I will say, we end up talking them out of it. It's the other 25% that we end up doing it. And make sure you charge accordingly for it, because it is additional service, and sometimes that's the only way to appease some clients. If nothing more, I'll scoot on.
Looks like that's all for now.
Okay, thank you. All right. Back to item E, any act or combination of acts that would be viewed as offering professional land surveying services. Once again, this comes back to whether it's yourself doing it, whether you're sending people out under your direction, under your license. These all apply. So whatever you feel like doing. Setting monuments which have the appearance of or for the express purpose of marking land boundaries. And a lot of people will say, well, no, I just set lat. Well, but that's still telling somebody, that's defining something. So be careful on how you present your arguments on what you've said. Oh, I just set a nail. That was, well, but you're trying to tell somebody something sometimes that that's why myself, you try to differentiate stuff and really label it up too. I mean, if it's a traverse point, it's a traverse point. Otherwise, people look at stuff and go, what is that? Providing any sketch, map, plat, report, minor record, or any other document that indicates land boundaries or monuments. This kind of goes back to the other one with on top of big sketches. Except that if the sketch, map, plat, report, minor record, or other document is a copy of an original prepared by a professional land surveyor, and if proper reference to that fact be made on the document. And I got to tell you, I'm still not a big fan of this one. I really wanted to strike the second part of that, and my other two members of the task force made a compelling argument that, you know what, there's still times when we need to show something, but we haven't done quite enough work to really say it meets the boundary requirements, and just make sure that you reference that information. Myself, I don't like doing that because it could perpetuate potentially bad information if I haven't done my what I feel is a proper verification. But I will tell you, I mean, we just recently got a plat on a piece of property that we're going to get ready to resurvey and provide some development work on. Somebody did a plat of survey based upon a 15-year Alta survey. States on there, no field work done, nothing. Yet said that plat meets the Illinois standard requirements for minimum requirements for boundary survey, and shows every feature on that plat from the 15-year earlier, including monuments and how much they were off. I guess myself, I wouldn't be willing to send somebody a bill for turning out a plat like that, but I can see where some may. It is what it is. But then I guess the big thing that just then hangs it up for me is saying that it meets the Illinois minimums. No, it doesn't. You haven't done anything. You've copied a plat. And if you put a CYA note on there that basically says this is somebody else's plat and therefore should be construed as exactly that, leave it at that. So it's where you decide to perpetuate other people's work and then go across that line and say, yep, I'm willing to sign it as a survey. That to me was just a little bit too far, but anyway. Next one is performing topographic surveys. This is where the earlier caveat of precluding other people with various licenses, with the exception of a licensed professional engineer knowledgeable in topographic surveys that performs a topographic survey specific to his or her design project. Here's where my hangup is. I don't have a problem with any engineer that will go out and do their own topo. Don't reference the boundary because that you're not qualified and are licensed to do. It's the engineers, once again, that have an engineering license, and they may be great civil designers, but they don't know topographic surveys. They don't know how to develop a surface or a tin, how things need to be located in the field, and showing a correct representation. There again, if they put it on their own design, use it for their own design, put it on their own work, that's on them. That's going to be their liability. Unfortunately, so often when somebody sees that topographic survey, they're going to relate it to not necessarily a particular surveyor, but to a survey, to surveying in general. And that doesn't do us any favors, because bad topos done by engineering professionals that are not qualified to do topos, or people on their staff that are not qualified to do topos, it doesn't do our profession any good. So I try to help engineers when I come across this at times, that really, what did you save by not having a surveyor do this? not having a qualified technician do this work, how much did you really save? Is it that substantial of amount of money or time for your client? So, I mean, that's then the next section goes on to say licensed professional engineer may not, however, offer topographic services that are independent of his design, which I hope not. I hope not. Sure hope they don't. Next one, we had to change up a little bit because of adding a few more terms in our definitions. Locating, relocating, establishing, reestablishing, and the department wanted to take out the reestablishing with the hyphen in it. Retracing, laying out, or staking of the location, alignment, or elevation of any existing or proposed improvements whose location is dependent upon property, easement, and right-of-way boundaries. This kind of goes twofold. This goes into, existing improvements. That's topography. Topography / planimetric work. We need to know where any improvements are in relationship to the property itself, the property lines. That is part of our work. And then it goes on to say proposed improvements. We're going to get a little bit fuzzy on construction staking and who can and who can't do it. We won't get into that today. I have my very strong opinions on who can and can't, and this isn't the time or place, but bottom line is that's part of our definitions, is to be able to state those proposed improvements, and they are based, whether it's a roadway, property, it's all based upon land boundaries. That in that instance, that's part of what our role as land surveying is. From here on out, these are ones that we added as a task force, and really felt that they very strongly that these needed to be included. Number 5, providing consultation, investigation, planning, mapping, assembling, and authoritative interpretation of gathered measurements, documents, and evidence in relation to the location of property, easements, and right-of-way boundaries. This kind of goes back to the professional engineer, the architect, the attorney that is providing consultation on a survey, what it is and what it isn't, what boundary rights a client or an owner may have. Bottom line is, this puts the burden of expert on us as that educated and licensed professional profession. That's who we are. This is what we do. So that was one statement that we really wanted to make, to kind of draw that line in the sand of, if you're talking about surveying and you want something authoritative, it needs to be done by a surveyor, period. Number 6 is measuring, evaluating, mapping, and reporting the location of existing and proposed building structures and other improvements or their surrounding topography with respect to current flood insurance rate mapping or Federal Emergency Management Agency mapping, along with locating of inland wetland boundaries delineated by a qualified specialist in relation to the location of property, easement, and right-of-way boundaries. This is something that we saw, I believe it was a couple of the states on the East Coast had started with, they've got it in their statutes, the mapping, the location of the wetland boundaries. As long as they're physically located by a wetland specialist scientist, and then we locate those flags, that's part of our duties as a surveyor. If you're just showing it on a general aerial map, no relations to any boundaries, and it's out in the middle of a 600-acre park, fine. The environmental people can do that all day long with their handhelds, whatever. But if they come along and it is, if it's on a piece of property that we're surveying, and there needs to be a relationship to existing or proposed improvements, and in relationship to boundaries, that's part of our purview. That's part of our responsibility. We decided to take it another step further and include FEMA flood mapping. As long as the mapping is is definitive, and it's usually in the elevation of the actual floodway lines, floodplain lines. It's not the location on the map, because as we know, we get out in the field, the topography, if it varies from the mapping itself whenever it was last done, but yet the elevation of that floodway has not changed, it is up to us. It's under our direction. We map where those floodplain lines are, where those floodway lines are, where they are accurately in relationship to into improvements, to property lines, easement lines, right-of-way lines. So once again, it's drawing that line in the sand versus an engineer or an environmental consultant going out there with their handheld and saying, "Yep, this is where the floodplain line is," and being off horizontally, vertically, and in relationship to property lines. I mean, it affects development. It affects storage capacities. It affects a lot of things that go along with real property. So this is one thing we felt very, very strongly in adding, like I said, to kind of draw that line in the sand. And I got to tell you, I've had nothing but positive feedback from various entities stating this, that somebody needed to take a hold of this and recognize that this is something that needs to be mapped a lot more accurately than bringing a KML file in from Google Earth or FEMA or ArcView or what have you, or referencing in a PDF. We need to be able to map this a lot more accurately than we have. So that's kind of where the genesis of that one came about. Next couple here were ones that carried over from before. Determining the horizontal and vertical position or state plane coordinates for any monument or reference point. Once again, we get back into some of the real geodesy, but as long as it marks a title or real property line. So often people surveyors get themselves in a bind with state plane coordinates, and they are confusing. And it's going to get even more confusing coming up to 2022 with the upcoming datum change, both vertically and horizontally. That'll be for another day, and please make yourself aware and available for any and all educational opportunities for the 2022 datum. But bottom line is if we're setting points or establishing these types of reference points, that comes under land surveying. Preparing, creating, or modifying electronic or computerized data or maps, including land information systems and geographical information systems, relative to the performance of activities in the above items. Bottom line, if it had anything to do with boundaries and the location of things in relationship to boundaries, and this is all being put into an electronic form or any kind of information system, it is the requirement to be done by or under the direction of a professional land surveyor, period. Letter H, once again, the determining versus establishing or adjusting a control network or any geodetic control network or cadastral as it pertains to those items, and as it relates to the United States rectangular system, title or real property corner measurement monuments or geodetic monuments. Once again, if you're not qualified with, if you're not experienced enough to feel like you're qualified in these high accuracy reference networks, doesn't preclude you from learning and gaining the experience, but put it in somebody's hands that is, bottom line. Preparing and attesting to the accuracy of a map showing the land boundaries and lines. Once again, it gets back to the consulting. If it's not done by a land surveyor, how can you know that it's meeting land surveying requirements? J is executing and issuing certificates, endorsements, reports, and plats that portray horizontal and vertical relationship between existing physical objects and structures. A lot of times this is getting more into urban areas with with 3 dimensions, condominiums, things like that. Bottom line is it's something that that few surveyors are very, very good in, and they're the ones that should be doing it. So, but once again, falls under our act. Okay, acting in direct supervision and control of land surveying activities, or acting as a manager in any place of business that solicits, performs, and practices land surveying. This one is, I mean, it's been in here for a long time. It still is a kind of a thorn in some people's sides, because, don't get me wrong, there are good SITs, there are good survey technicians that, for the most part, yeah, they're running a department. By professional design firm standards, they can't own it or truly oversee it, run it. They can manage it. But bottom line is, how can you have somebody that's not qualified and licensed as a land surveyor overseeing a department that may or may not contain licensed land surveyors? I mean, somebody, and we all know that how you get around this sometimes with principles and various things, but by statute, that licensed person is the one that's supposed to be in charge of the operations, the activities of land surveying in that business. So, letter L, boundary analysis and determination of property, easement, and right-of-way lines on any plat submitted for regulatory review by governmental or municipal agencies. This one's brand new. This has been caused by a multitude, and I assume everybody on the webinar has probably seen this in one shape or form. It unfortunately is rampant, especially in the bigger city suburbia areas, where they do not have where municipalities, counties, governmental agencies do not have a land surveyor on staff. Plats, whether it be subdivision, easement, vacation, annexation, anything that was done by and completed by a professional land surveyor is being reviewed by a non-professional land surveyor. A lot of times it's engineering interns that are reading through a checklist, or they've got just enough knowledge that they're checking some of these boundaries, and they're your area of mapping departments are become really bad about this. That they're checking closure in their GIS, and our shape doesn't match the parcel they have in their database. Bottom line is that our work, once again, is being reviewed and critiqued and being kept from being approved because of review from non-qualified individuals. We put this in here to try to help stop that, or at least have a little more of a hammer back against these governmental agencies to say, you've got an engineer that's reviewing engineering plans, have a surveyor review survey plats. So bottom line is, if you're not qualified to review the work that comes in, the example I try to always give is that if a building plan comes in with significant structural engineering on it, you're not giving that to an intern, you're not giving that to a staff member, you're farming that out to a qualified structural engineer. Why is it any different with something that's been done by a professional land surveyor? So don't know that's going to get any traction, don't know that it will ever be able to stop any of these municipalities, but like I said, once again, we just decided we wanted to draw our line in the sand here.
Hey Tim, we've got a few questions.
Yeah, fire away.
So first, Todd Horton wanted everyone to know he's going to be speaking on evolving datums in the GNSS era at the 2019 IPLSA conference. He'll address the upcoming changes to the horizontal and vertical datums in 2020. So also just a reason for me to plug the annual conference. If you haven't registered yet, go do that. We've got two questions also. So the first one is, do you know if Opus is planning on publishing both solutions on reports after the change.
They are still working through what the final version of the Opus report is going to look like. In fact, I was just at, last week, I was just at the NGS office in Corbin with their people talking about some other things. And while they have they're coming up with the reference network itself and coming up with the final configuration, they're still working through the software and a final determination of what the output is going to look like, because they have to draw a line somewhere as well, and how much programming they're going to put into all of their efforts, how much more information they're going to still leave on the data sheets. There's still a lot more to come as far as the final output. So I guess the best way I can say is stay tuned, more to come, because that question has come up in several other places, and I know it's being looked at, and they're trying to make a decision on how much to go going forward.
Okay, and next, someone is wondering if each company still has to have a managing agent.
Yes, and I believe that's in another section as far as design firms. We can probably could go out and find that. I don't know it specifically off the top of my head, but yes, for any of the design professions, each location is supposed to have a managing agent for each of those professions. I can tell you, based upon the amount of staff and investigators and people able to follow up at the department, they're not as thorough in their checking of this as it goes along. But that is statute, that is law, that you're supposed to have a managing agent for each design profession in each office.
Okay, that looks like that's all for now.
Okay. And then to just wrap up section 5, hey, if you're doing any of these, you're soliciting or performing, you've got to be a land surveyor. So bottom line, you've got to, if you want to do any of these things, follow the rules. All right, moving on into the other sections. These will go rather quickly because part of these are the actual board that is created to oversee us. A lot of this did not change, but I wanted to take this time if there were any questions like the previous one, as far as what the duties of the board are and what do they truly do, and how do they interact with the surveying licensing board itself, and the surveying profession itself in the community. So powers and duties, pretty simple. The Illinois Administrative Procedure Act created these. They conduct and authorize examinations. They put together the rules for examination. They have the ability to conduct the hearings or proceedings to talk to people about complaints and to see about revoking, suspending, refusing to renew. I mean, there's lots of variations on the discipline. One thing I will comment on is that I think for most surveying type of issues that come before the board, most things aren't malicious. Most things are, I hate to go back to what we were saying earlier about our jobs being dictated by time and budgets. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's things just being shortcutted because of budgets and time. And like I said, nothing's necessarily malicious, but in our haste, we go through some things, and next thing we know, we kick out a plat, or we go pin something, and it's not right. And I guess for me, how you react to the complaint, whether it comes from the client and or comes from the department, that goes a long way to how you're to be treated going forward. I mean, I would like to think that if a client has a complaint or a fellow surveyor has a complaint about something you've done, that rather than just immediately filing something with the board, bring it to the surveyor. Say, are you aware you've done this? Are you aware you've left off this? And I think, unfortunately, because of the competitive nature of our profession, a lot of times we take that in such a negative tone that it's, you know what, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want, but we should. I know for a fact I'm not perfect. I know I've left things off before, and I appreciated people calling me and saying, "Hey, did you realize you missed a dimension here, or you did something? You staked something that's 5 feet in the wrong place. One of your people did, or it was calced in the wrong place, what have you." I appreciate that because I know I'm not perfect, and I think we should all be given an opportunity to rectify because they are errors. They're not nothing's ever malicious for the most part, and we need to be able to communicate amongst each other that much more. And I'd like to think that we could resolve these a lot more before going to the board and going through all this rigmarole. But sometimes it's just not avoided. They push forward the rules and regulations as required by the Act. They are in charge of putting together the license for the corporations, partnerships, and all the other entities for surveying, and to be able to issue the license for those who qualify. Prescribe, adopt, and amend the rules for the surveying and related science curriculum. We'll get into that in a little bit here. What is the definition of related sciences and the qualifications for a surveyor? They do maintain the membership with the National Council of Engineering Examiners. It should be updated to say, and in ECEES and surveyors too. So, but they're part of a national organization that helps provide more broad direction on all of the design professionals. They get written recommendations to the board regarding the qualifications. So every time we're asked to fill out those forms for applicants, this is where it goes. This is where they make sure that all the right paperwork's in. They get it forwarded to the right people for review, and making sure that everything's all the requirements are met for qualifications. Department may change the rules for code of ethics and standard as necessary. And they consider recommendations from the board in making any changes to the code of ethics and the standards of practice. Department shall consult with the board. In this case, the board is the licensing board. This is and I should probably know this, it's either 6 or 7 licensed surveyors, and then it's one public member that determine the Illinois Surveying Licensing Board. So that's who the department is consulting with, is this board of surveyors. And this is what we're going through right now, the notice of proposal rulemaking, so we try and get it to the board. We're putting together this change in administrative code for making these rules. So the board is making their response now. Department shall review the board's recommendation on applications qualifications. When you file for your application to get your Illinois license, or you're having people do it now, this is where it goes. They forward it to the board. The board does their final review, and then they make their recommendation on whether or not an applicant should be allowed to take a test or not. Let's see. Six land surveyors and 1 public member. I was close. All need to be residents of Illinois. Amazingly enough, it's tough to get land surveyors to join this board. While it's not completely voluntary, you get paid for some travel time and some stipends. It can be a lot of work. It can be some dedication. it's kind of an unsung position that that doesn't get a lot of kudos, but there's a lot of work that goes into being on the board. Should be in different geographical areas. Let's see. If you get really bored or can't sleep at night, I go back and read some of this stuff. Each board member may receive compensation when attending. Like I said, most of the time it's basically just a stipend and some travel costs. They will get their travel and accommodations paid for whenever they need to go to some of the national society things occasionally, with NCWS and some of their board meetings. Rest of this is pretty standard. Okay, the board shall exercise the following functions, powers, and duties. Review the applicant qualifications. They conduct the hearings. They do visit the universities and colleges to make sure that everything is it meets the requirements. But we've got a small caveat to that we'll get back to in a little while about evaluating the curriculum. And then once they're done with everything, they write written recommendations to the secretary. Department can talk to the board about knowledge, which I will admit they sometimes are better at than others, as far as seeking out knowledge on surveying and what constitutes surveying, what doesn't. There's been a few times that some engineering things have taken place that have just kind of scooted on through without our knowledge that really was infringing on surveying, that it should have come back through our board, should have, and that's part of the establishing that relationship with the department, making sure that they know we are the professionals in this case. Quorums, they need to review the applications and making sure if they have any questions to call and discuss these orally with the applicants. Determine eligibility for both the LS and now the survey intern, and make the recommendations on the applicants. Now, if it's on matters concerning the qualifications, the definition of the curriculum content and approval, standards of professional conduct and disciplinary actions, and the rules affecting these matters, the secretary needs to be able to make sure that the board stays on top of this stuff. So any deviation that comes from the department has to be getting to the board and make sure it gets back there in writing. The board shall have an opportunity to comment upon the secretary's decision, because unfortunately the secretary and the department end up having the final rule and everything, the final say and everything. As much as we'd like to say that they do rely on the licensing board, the surveying board for most things, there have been times in the past, especially with some proposed rules. I mean, some of this stuff goes back to, for those who are on here that may remember, we did some things with the topographic rules and legal description rules, that they were a lot more detailed in what the rules making committee had actually come up with. And by the time they got through the department, they were whittled down to just a shell of themselves. And that was what was approved, unfortunately. But we now have a different regime in there, different secretary, different leader of the department. So they've been a lot more friendly and a lot more accommodating to listening to this board's requests and requirements. Okay, moving on to the next section, kind of the meat of some things. Application for licensing and how the license is be displayed, your seal, which has changed, which a lot of people don't know. Unlicensed practices, we'll get into survey intern and supervision. Continuing education, we'll talk a little bit about that. Endorsements and fees, addresses. Okay, another reason part of we're here. Every person who desires to obtain a license shall apply to the department in writing upon forms prepared and furnished by the department. Yeah, that's pretty standard, and it's really too bad you have to write this stuff down, but you know what? It is what it is. It needs to be sent out to verify the applicant's education, their summary of their land surveying experience, who they worked under, and the quality of people that they have worked under. You know, it's unfortunate we've had to deny some applicants because of their education, or not necessarily their experience under some licensed or what were thought to be licensed people that turned out to be fraud. And that's all part of what the checking procedure is, because we are talking about a professional license. We are talking about somebody that then does pass a test and gets that professional license, can then go forward and provide a professional service. That's one reason this stuff is so gone through with such a fine-tooth comb for all of these things. The last piece here on this slide, this has become an interesting topic in different circles. An applicant who's graduated from a land surveying program outside the United States or its territories and whose first language is not English shall submit certification of passage of the test of English as a foreign language and a test of spoken English as defined by rule. I mean, I'll openly say that Chicago is kind of a melting pot, and I do know of at least one applicant in very, very recent memory that more than qualified for all the technical expertise, experience, educational, true on-the-job expertise. He cannot pass this test as English as a foreign language. He can't get past it. The bad thing is that his clientele and the company that he works with and their clientele is mostly of the same nationality that this gentleman is. But because of that, he cannot be approved for licensure. So I think he's still struggling to get through it, yet 90 to 95% of his clientele speak his language. So it's really too bad that it is like this, but like a lot of things, we do have to draw, like I've said several times earlier, got to draw this line in the sand. Yeah, it's not always black and white, and he's kind of a gray area where he's working. But if he had to go work in any other place, let's say that job fell through and he had to go work any other place, and a majority of the clients and the people he was dealing with did not speak the same language as he does, then there'd be a problem. And that becomes more of a bigger problem, really kind of a perception for the profession. So it's left in there as is for now. I do know that this is also being looked at in the other design professions. Because of the lack of qualified candidates that the design professions are able to get in, we're having this procession of baby boomers that are going to be getting ready to retire, and obviously our professional numbers of licensed land surveyors nationwide is dwindling. Yet we are getting qualified applicants coming in from out of the country, but yet they can't qualify because of this. Like I said, I'm not really going to make a statement on it one way or the other. It is what it is. It's still a statute, still a rule. This is definitely one that's going to be greatly debated in some circles from here on out, but it's something we're going to definitely have to think about if we don't want to turn away qualified applicants for the work we do. And then, unfortunately, standard, you got to have a social security number, as with most things. Excuse me. Department shall authorize examinations as recommended and approved by the board for licensure as a survey intern and professional surveyors at such time and place as it may determine. I guess the nice thing about going forward with technology, we're getting more and more technologically advanced that we're able to provide a lot of these tests online, and that hopefully we get to a point where it's going to be not necessarily on a as needed basis, but it's not just a couple of times a year. You know, if somebody comes in and they do meet the requirement, rather than making them wait 6 months, however, there will be an opportunity to take a proctored exam and be able to sit for that test and see if they qualify for that license. Examination of an applicant for licensure may include examinations as defined by rule. The substance and form of the examination shall be recommended and approved by the board. Each applicant shall be examined as to his knowledge of the statutes of the United States of America and the state of Illinois relating to the practice of land surveying and mathematics as applied to land surveying. All applicants for licensing as an LS shall be required to pass, as a proportion of the examination, a jurisdictional examination to determine the applicant's knowledge of the surveying tasks unique to the state of Illinois and the laws relating thereto. Something that has come up in the last couple of years as far as the state-specific Illinois test, just for those who know or may not know, that test has become quite antiquated, and there's a lot of sections in it that no longer, I won't say weren't completely relevant to what we do. Unfortunately, it's still something that's, until it gets updated, that's what we have to deal with. So if you do know those that are going to be taking the Illinois test anytime in the near future, it's going to be status quo. But there is a small group within the licensing board that's looking at updating those questions, and they hope to have something done next year and then instituted as quickly as possible. So just a heads up to, like I said, if you know of anybody that's thinking or planning on taking the Illinois test, it will stay the antiquated test for a short time, but it is going to get updated eventually to hopefully match new technology and new terms. This goes back to the examination. You pay the fees, you do it. If you don't take the exam within 3 years of filing your application, your fee is done and you got to start all over. So, okay, qualifications for licensing. We're all here, so hopefully we've all qualified one way or shape or another, but this just runs through the things that some small things that have changed. Persons who qualified to receive a license, who's applied in writing, who's not violated any of these acts. Good ethical character. Once again, what's ethics? I don't want to see it. Compliance with the code of ethics and the standards of practice. That's pursuant to this act, and has not committed any offense, act or offense in any jurisdiction. So if you have been disciplined in other jurisdictions, it will eventually catch up to you in Illinois, some way, shape, or form. They do talk to each other quite a bit. Who has been issued a license as a survey intern, who's passed the examination for the as a survey intern, has at least 4 years of responsible charge. That all gets back to what we talked about earlier under the definitions. What is responsible charge? We're seeing more and more people that are applying for the test. They've been under the direction of an LS, but they've been construction staking for 4 years. Very little, if any, boundary. Very little, if any, topographic work. Very little, if any, legal work, research, platting, any of that. It's all been construction staking, with, especially in the Chicago metropolitan area. And unfortunately, some of these applicants, some of them are getting by. Some are good test takers because they've been signed off by an LS. They are then approved to take the test. They are good test takers, and they do become an LS. However, they have no actual applicable experience as far as boundaries, as far as topographic surveys, as far as any research platting, like I said. And then all of a sudden they've got their license and they've been asked to do a land survey. And unfortunately, that license isn't Superman's cape. It isn't, I can now go sign anything. I can now go do this. Let me go find some irons and I'll sign that plat. Once again, it comes down to standard of care, applicable boundary knowledge, and what that person is able to do. And that also falls back into the ethics as well. Is it ethical for me to take on this job when I know very little about boundary determination, because my concentration of my work has been in construction? So, I mean, it's a fine line, but that's part of it. And what somebody wants to sign off on that reasonable charge experience, once again, that comes down to that LS's ethics. It is what it is. If you've passed the examination to receive the license, and we've added these for the educational requirements. Graduate of an approved land surveying curriculum of at least 4 years who's passed examinations of the fundamentals of surveying for rule. Okay, here's the question though now that's been raised by the department. This is the new statute that's in place, which it actually cleaned up. It was either one set approved, one set accredited. Well, which is it? So we made it approved. Well, the question now is, what is an approved land surveying curriculum? Does that mean it's ABET accredited? Is it any of the other ones? Any of the alphabet soup? What does that mean? And the department does not approve any curriculums. So what determines an approval of a land surveying curriculum? So unfortunately, this is a little bit of a Pandora's box that's been opened. If you're coming from a 4-year land surveying degree, a Ferris State, a Troy, Penn State, Fresno State, a 4-year degree, those are recognized, and I'm not sure what accreditation they truly have, external accreditation, but they probably do. I don't know them off the top of my head. Those usually slip through no problem, because in going through the review of your transcript, it is a 4-year bachelor's. It does have 24 plus credit hours of land surveying classes. It does have the required sciences. It does have the required math and all of those classes. So it checks all the boxes. Where it really gets into a hang-up then is the next one. A graduate of a baccalaureate curriculum of at least 4 years, including the 24 hours of land surveying courses from an approved land surveying curriculum and related science courses, who's passed the examination of the fundamentals of surveying. Where the hang-up now is chances are that baccalaureate curriculum, wherever that person got that baccalaureate, probably didn't go to the same college as the 24 hours of land surveying. Take, for instance, the ones we have in state. We have Parkland College. They're currently putting on a program that will allow an applicant to go through the 24 credit hours that will theoretically qualify for licensure, except the department doesn't approve these classes, and so they're in process of reviewing and changing their administrative code, the rules of the related sciences and the types of education that can go in here, that will get approved for an applicant. So unfortunately, like I said, we've opened a little bit of a Pandora's box here, in that we still, yes, we're saying you can have any bachelor's. You gotta have the 24 credit hours. You gotta have the related sciences, which to tell you real quick, like, it is 15 hours of mathematics, college algebra and above. Basic science, which is physics or chemistry, of 8 hours. You need to have 20 hours of basic sciences, which is included but not limited to geology, geography, dendrology, astronomy, biology, soil mechanics, and engineering sciences. And then the 24 credit hours of land surveying classes. So depending on where you go and get those classes, it's going to be up to the department to then decide whether or not they're approved or not. So I didn't realize we were going to have such a hang up with the term approved. I understand they're trying to keep fraudulent applicants for sliding through, but there's got to be an easier way to make sure that the college courses that are available now are going to work for a licensee. Especially now in this day and age, we're getting more and more online classes. The University of Maine is opening up some stuff. Wyoming has done some stuff for a while. New Mexico State is starting to do some online stuff, and that's on top of all of the sciences, basic sciences, and other things that you can take at community colleges or whatever online schools that offer these types of classes. So it's a little bit of a hang up. I'm hoping we get through it. I guess the good thing is we don't have a slew of applicants coming through right now, but we do not want to hang up the applicants that are going to be coming through, the people that are looking at future professions and looking at this and going, well, if I don't know if they'll license me or not, why should I bother? I'll just be an engineer. We want to make sure and give these applicants and future professionals an opportunity to do this. So, and then what we did strike was who has a baccalaureate degree in a related science. So we wanted to make sure, like I said earlier, open it up to all baccalaureates, because the college experience is important as far as the business side, but you still have to fall back on at least the 24 hours of land surveying classes, qualified land surveying classes, and the related sciences, the math, the sciences, the basic sciences. Those are a necessity to qualifying for this at this point in time. If we get time at the end, I do have kind of a question and answer for you guys about some potential changes, some things that I'm thinking about, we're looking at to help broaden the licensure, open up even that much more, not necessarily out of necessity, but out of reality of what we do. So, and we'll get into that a little bit later. I'll try to make some time for that at the end. Okay, let's see. Back to here. Okay, same basic things with the survey intern. Good moral character. That's a good one. Who's a good moral character? Have you met the surveyors? But yes, good moral character. Education set forth in this act. Pass the examination as a survey intern. Okay. And then we get back into basically the same things we just talked about. Graduate of an approved land surveying curriculum of at least 4 years. Okay, what's approved curriculum? So we'll see where that goes. This middle one has just come up as an issue as well, just so people know. An applicant in the last year of an approved land surveying or related science curriculum who passes the examination of the fundamentals of surveying and furnishes proof that the applicant graduated within a 12-month period following the examination. This was trying to give an applicant a little bit of a head start. They're in their final year, just like engineering interns. They're in their final year. They're in this for the long haul to take the test. Well, now the department is questioning what's the approved land surveying or related science curriculum. So I'm not sure where this is going to hang some things up. It's going to hang up a few applicants in the short term. They need to get this ironed out because the intent was, if it's out there and if you've got a curriculum that's being offered, I don't know what it's going to take to become approved. What truly that means in any shape or form. But bottom line is that we need to figure that out and figure that out quickly. And then the last one is the same as the LS, graduate of a baccalaureate, and the land surveying classes and the related science classes. Okay, license to be displayed. Well, I display mine. I proudly display mine. I guess it's interesting. A quick side note: the other professions that get licensed through the state of Illinois, and I'm thinking of barbers, beauticians, those types of people that hang theirs up, and then they white out or put a sticky note over their address. If people want to find me in this day and age, people want to find you, they'll find you. Don't worry about covering it up on your license. But anyway, that's a small side tangent. Sorry for the distraction. The seal. Every professional land surveyor shall have a reproducible seal or facsimile, which may be computer generated. There are some people that still don't. If you want to press everything, great, go ahead. It's obviously still allowable. But there are still some that say, well, that's class and null and void. You can't do that. It's got to be a wet seal. Well, no, it doesn't. Let's see. And to sit here and say that it doesn't happen, that things get sealed and kicked out, not absolutely within vision of the LS. Once again, what's ethics? I see everything that goes out myself before it goes. I may have somebody else send it, but I at least do a cursory look. If it's got my seal on it, my signature on it, I see it. Some may not be as diligent, but excuse me. But that's up to them. And in the bottom of the first paragraph, the licensee may provide at his or her sole discretion an original signature in the licensee's handwriting, a scanned document of the scanned copy of the document bearing the original signature, or a signature generated by a computer. There are still people that have serious hang-ups on that all these surveys that are going out getting signed by people that aren't even in the office. Once again, it comes down to ethics. If the plat's wrong, the plat's wrong whether you sign it or not. And if it comes out that it wasn't done under your direction, then it will eventually come out. I mean, there's bigger issues there. It is unlawful to affix one seal to documents if it masks the true identity of the person who actually exercised direction, control, and supervision of the preparation of that work. Don't know why I'd want to do that, but it was necessary to put it in there. Yeah, the surveyor who signs it is not responsible for damage if it's used by somebody else beyond who he or she authorized and originally signed and sealed that for. So hopefully, before that survey goes on to someone else for another reason, that the original creator of that survey, that licensed land surveyor, is brought up to speed on what it's going to be used for. Here's the no-brainer of it's unlawful to operate unless you are a PLS, LS, or SI. Pretty straightforward. Anybody that says that they are one will be held, pay a civil penalty. And it's a rather uncomfortable hearing process that you go through. One I don't recommend from what I hear. It's unlawful for any survey intern to practice land surveying except under the responsible charge. It's amazing to me the number of interns that they say, well, I have a number, I have a certificate, I can do something, you know, but somebody knows that I'm still in training. No, you can't. That's where that gets lost in translation. I'm not sure where, but bottom line, it's you can't, and you're the way I look at it is you're halfway home. You're halfway to that license. Don't muck it up now. Expiration date needs to be shown on there if you haven't renewed your license. Hence the reason you're here today for continuing education. You got to get it done. November 30th. I think it's still $60. I think. Somebody else paid mine, so I'm not sure who it did. You can go on inactive status, but you got to pay the renewal fee to get it all up to speed if you decide to have it renewed. If you have been expired and you want to have it restored, you've got to provide all the fees and basically all the continuing education is going to take to catch up, along with the restoration fee. But if you have been, if it has been expired because of military duty, it can be reinstated as long as you have proof of your duty. And then the last one, their license for the survey intern does not expire. Hopefully, somebody that has gone through the pain and trouble of getting their past fundamentals of surveying will continue and go on and hopefully get their license. But real life happens, work happens, family happens. You got to do what you got to do. Getting the rest of your education in a 10-year span sometimes is tough as well, or experience. I mean, just depending on what you're doing. This way, it doesn't expire. Continuing education, the reason we're here, we need to be doing it, and I guess we weren't doing it enough on our own that where it had to be mandated. Hopefully, people will stay active enough in their continuing education. It doesn't have to always be just sitting in these certified or whatever relatable seminars to continue your education in whatever it may be. You can put it in inactive status if you'd like. I know some people that have retired, not knowing what their next move was going to be, and they went ahead and just placed it in inactive. I do know some that that back in the dark days of the recession, 2008, 9, 10, that ended up going into other fields or just basically other employment to keep a paycheck, and didn't want to go through not just the licensing, but the continuing education requirements as well. So they put their status on inactive. And then if you do want to activate it, you have to catch up on your continuing education. Endorsement. Basically, if you're recognized as a licensed land surveyor in Illinois, you're recognized as a licensed land surveyor, but you got to follow their rules. And if you're licensed somewhere else and you try to come into Illinois, whatever the license requirements were at the time in Illinois, that's what you have to pass. Fees, they'll just set the fees as set by rules. They'll collect them as they see fit. And in addition to the survey intern change, one thing that the department now is going to collect, it's much easier in this mobile society we live in now. People are more apt to keep their email addresses than they are their addresses or their cell phones. So, and in this case, they don't even collect phone data. So they kept it just back to email addresses to be able to get a hold of people. Advertising, just don't be misleading. Bottom line, don't be misleading. Professional design registration. There's a whole section on design firm registration, whether you're sole proprietor, partnership, various corporations, businesses, very specific. Bottom line just says, hey, you've got to follow these design rules if you're going to be one of those. Simply stated, any sole proprietorship not owned and operated by an Illinois licensed design professional licensed in this act shall be prohibited from offering professional land surveying services to the public. So if you're not licensed as a surveyor under this act, you can't offer land surveying services to the public. Where people have gotten hung up on this, they go, well, but I am an Illinois licensed design professional, but I'm an engineer. So I can offer surveying if I have somebody that's signing it for me. No, it's licensed design professional, licensed under this specific act of the land surveyors. So people tried to sneak around that one, and it just doesn't work. Here's the question from earlier. Any professional design firm seeking to be registered pursuant to the provisions shall not be registered unless one or more managing agents in charge of land survey activities in the state are designated by the design firm. Each managing agent must at all times maintain a valid active license to practice land surveying in Illinois. So they have to be managing agents. And let's see. Yes, list of all offices in which the design firm provides professional land surveying to the public. So if there's not a licensed managing agent in that office, technically you can't offer it. So bottom line. Department shall issue each business a certificate of registration. And you got to update that. I believe it's April 30th of the odd years. Yeah, managing agent terminates his or her status as a managing agent. You got to let the department know within 10 days. Got to get it squared up, and got 30 days to get somebody back in there. Yeah, bottom of it, if the design firm continues to operate and offer professional land surveyor services after the termination, the department may seek prosecution. So bottom line is keep a managing agent in those offices. No professional design firm shall be relieved of its responsibility for the conduct or acts of its agents. So if somebody in your office screws up and it's under your design firm registration, design firm is on the hook as well. Disciplinary actions against the design firm are the same as they would be done as against a land surveyor. And any professional services corporation, sole proprietor, or design firm offering land surveying services must have a resident professional land surveyor whose license is not suspended or revoked, overseeing the land surveying practices in each location in which land surveying services are provided. There it is in black and, actually in this case, white. All right. Partnerships, that was repealed a while back. No big deal. All right, let's blow through these last sections. I want to leave the last part for some Q&A on stuff I want to ask you guys. Q&A if possible. Okay, due process for potential illegal surveyor activities. Okay, these are the things you do to screw up. Bottom line, you can be probation, administrative supervision, suspended, or revoked, or may reprimand for the following: flat out misstating stuff to the department, violating the act, convicted of or entry of a plea of guilty to a crime that is a felony under the laws of the United States. That is a misdemeanor of essential element is dishonesty, or any crime that is directly related to the practice of the profession. We've had a couple of issues in the last year or so with a few of these. I mean, what is a felony? The big thing here is, because there have been a couple of surveyors that have either have been found guilty of a felony or in the process, letting due process go, and it's been the interpretation of this conviction of any crime that is a felony under the laws of the United States, and that is directly related to the practice of the profession. Now, in the cases that have something that's come forward already in the past year, while it wasn't in the practice related to the practice of the profession, it was about the integrity of the profession. That person's license was revoked, period. There's been questions. There's a couple other cases that are pending out there of people that have done some felony things not related to surveying. But the question comes back to is, does it apply to the character of the profession? And until the guilty plea is either rendered or not, there's no finality to it. But the question is, how is it affecting the profession? If it says where this essential element is dishonesty. I mean, if you embezzle a bunch of money from your company and go to jail, should your license be suspended or revoked? I guess it's on a case-by-case basis. Depends. What the department keeps coming back to is how it's related to the practice of the profession, and not always necessarily in the eyes of the integrity of the profession. So fine line there, but long story short is, stay out of trouble. You'll be fine. Keep your license. Making any misrepresentation for getting your license or restoration or renewal. Making false statements to get somebody to pay you. Proof of carelessness, incompetence, negligence, or misconduct. Aiding or assisting another person in violating any provision of the act. Failing to provide the information because you're just stubborn and say, I didn't do anything wrong. The department can suspend or revoke you anyway. Engaging in dishonorable, unethical, unprofessional conduct of character. Likely to deceive, defraud, or harm the public. Inability to practice with reasonable judgment due to any kind of addiction. Discipline by any other governmental agency of some sort can lead to suspension or revoke. Any kind of directly or indirectly, any kind of bribes or gift giving can be seen as that. This is the one where surveyors need to stick to their guns. Issuing a map or plat of survey where the fee for the professional service is contingent on the real estate transaction closing. Washout surveys. These are illegal. Don't agree to them. Don't agree to them, because if you, I mean, technically, if you do, somebody that's selling the property, deal doesn't go through. You don't get paid, but the seller, who is still responsible for getting that survey, wants that survey. But yet, you wrote a contract say it was contingent on that closing, and it doesn't. You don't get paid. They don't get their survey. Then it gets to be contentious. Well, bottom line is they still ordered the survey, and they're going to hold you, whether you got paid or not, in contempt for not providing that survey. So be a little careful there. Stay away from the washout surveys. Don't pay your fines if you do get fined by the department, and further action. Don't practice on expired license. Once you get all done with this, renew your license. Get it done with. Putting your seal or permitting your seal to be put on somebody else's stuff. Don't do it. Flat out, don't do it. This one is a tough one, and I've talked about this one with several people because of the aging of our profession. The inability to practice the profession with reasonable judgment, skill, or safety as a result of a physical illness, including but not limited to deterioration through the aging process or loss of motor skill, or a mental illness or disability. Seen some bad plats coming through, people that are still drawing stuff by hand. You can't read it. You don't know what actual determinations are being made by some of these small professions, the mom and pops. And who knows, the 2008 recession might have wiped them clean. They still have to work. They still have to go out and do some of these surveys, what have you. At some point in time, there just needs to be a hard conversation made. I'd rather have the conversation be had with that person before it goes disciplinary action. But just like a driver's license, pull it. You're not doing the public any favors. If they're getting business out there and providing bad information, bad products, we need to pull them. Failure to adequately supervise or control land surveying operations being performed by subordinates. Talking to several different people, we're trying to just off the record come up with a fine line of how many subordinates can an LS really take on and adequately mentor and adequately supervise. Depending on the person, it can be anywhere from, in conversations, 3 to 6 people. If you've got one person overseeing 20, they're not seeing everything. If you got one LS overseeing that many people, that many plats going out, that many sites being worked on, there's got to be some deficiencies, and so that's the reason that one's in there. If somebody's found to allow those deficiencies to keep sneaking through, that can be called up on. Okay, enforcing this section, the department, once there's a possible violation, may compel a person who is licensed to practice under this act to submit to a mental or physical examination. That it is possible that a person's mental capability can be tested, can be, for lack of a better term, on trial for keeping their license. I hate to put it in the same vein as a driver's license, but it truly is. This is something that's affecting people's real property, and in some cases can affect other surveying operations, whether it be topographic surveys, construction layout, what have you. It can affect a lot of things. So they do have the right to request an applicant or a licensee to submit to an examination, either mental and or physical. So keep that in mind. That's out there. That if somebody's having some substance abuse problems, or somebody has been incapacitated by some way, shape, or form, there is this way of going about doing some things. You hate to go that route, but if somebody's putting out bad product and is really putting a stain on the surveying profession, this needs to be this needs to be dealt with in a timely manner. If a person's license is suspended of a compelled mental or physical examination, there has to be a hearing on that person's license immediately after, and the department and the board shall review everything and make a determination of what needs to happen. And just like any other issue where there's mental capacity being challenged, if a licensee that has been suspended wants to restore their license, they have to go through the proper channels to resume. So, department can deny license based upon defaulting on your loans. So, that's what I tell these kids: don't default on your student loans. Stay on top of them. If you're delinquent in your child support, they can ding your license, which is a shame, but it is what it is. If you don't pay your taxes, you can have your license dinged. So be careful on that one as well. All right, the power to cease and desist. The board has that power. The board and the department has that power. Like it says, through the attorney general or the state's attorney of that county. They can yank your license for if they find it compelling enough to be able to do it. So if you screwed up that badly, they can yank your license. Full investigation has to be had, but bottom line is it has to be had. Probably not much different than a driver's license or other void cards and various things. Hunting licenses, fishing licenses, due process has to follow, but they can be pulled, and all has to be public hearings. There has to be a stenographer present to transcribe everything for posterity and make all of these proceedings available. They do have the power to subpoena and depose, and everything has to be done under oath. And if there's testimony that basically is compelling enough to say, this is the way it is, it can be introduced during the proceedings. Notice of the hearings have to be timely. That hasn't always been the case, but it's supposed to be timely. I'll be honest, this board and department has been better than last couple of organizations. They've gotten a little better on putting stuff together in a more timely fashion. And just like anything else, if you disagree with the findings, there are procedures in place to protest that and have more public hearings to further your case. If you feel like something's not been completely looked at adequately, we could always the possibility for a rehearing if it's deemed necessary. And the secretary also has the ability to ask for a rehearing if they think that something's not been done in the correct manner. And this section 36 allows for the appointment of a hearing officer as a neutral party to hear everything, so it's not skewed towards the department or towards the person in question. And basically, if you don't pay your bills, they're going to fine you some more, and with penalties. And Once it's all signed and done, it just has to be signed by the secretary of the department and by the board, and they're the ones that have the authority to push any type of disciplinary action forward. Once everything is said and done, if you pass your statutory time, you can see about having it restored and go through the process. There are times when things are bad enough that you're asked to surrender your license, and if you don't, then they'll seize it and revoke it. There are temporary suspensions depending on the violations. All of this can be reviewed under. All these findings can be reviewed under Code of Civil Procedure, which is basically the review law. And it all needs to be certified for record. And these instances do qualify as a Class A misdemeanor or Class 4 felony for second or subsequent offense for these violations. So it's not necessarily just a slap on the wrist or lose your license for a short time, whatever. This also qualifies in the eyes of the law of a Class A misdemeanor for the first offense and the Class 4 felony is the second. And it goes back through the following the acts that we listed off before. Practicing land surveying without a license and such and such. All fines and penalties are in the treasury of the county that the violation happened in. And let's get into the last section here. Okay, these two sections to me are as important as anything. As we'll go, most of everything we'll go through. Section 44, plats and licenses is prima facie evidence with the record of plats. All plats and licenses issued by a professional land surveyor under his hand and seal shall be received as prima facie evidence in all courts in the state. Bottom line is, it's accepted as evidence. There will be a determination on the validity of that evidence, just like any normal court case. But the fact is, it will be accepted on its face. Whatever it is, it comes in. It's going to be accepted. Testimony will be for and against the actual evidence, but it's all part of it. Surveyor can have his plats recorded in the county where it lies. And if the subdivisions or dedications are subject to statutory provisions, all in relationship to the approval, recording, and filing of the plats or dedications. So any fees, any statutory requirements for those counties, they have to follow, bar none. We do have minimums as far as the administrative codes for minimums of the surveys. But if there's something that's more restrictive per county, bottom line is they have to follow those. Something we tried to get added to the plats and licenses also is prima facie, which is included in several other states, and we just couldn't get the development and their counsel to agree to this. Actually, the lobbyist, our lawyer lobbyist for IPLSA agreed as well that we should be able to do this. Was the introduction of testimony, written testimony by, say, adjacent neighbors, by family members on items that are specific to boundary, that are items specific to the survey itself. So if in the process of doing that survey, you come across the 95-year-old farmer next door that said, oh yeah, back in 1940, the stone was at this corner post, and then it was tore out by this farmer or whatever process, that can be written and accepted by the court as prima facie evidence. versus having that person come in and actually testify that same evidence. Really wanted to do that because obviously there's people that don't want to take the time out to go to the courthouse and be part of anything that's going on. But like I said, unfortunately the attorneys for the department decided not to allow that. Haven't given up hope. I think it's still something. Like I said, whether or not that person's testimony is accepted or not as fact, the fact that it's allowed to be heard, that's the big thing. So moving on to section 45. This is a big one, and I didn't realize how big this was as far as nationwide and how many states across the country don't have right of entry. Now, I mean, right of entry means a couple of different things to various people, unfortunately. On its face, professional land surveyor or persons under his direct supervision, keep that in mind, that's people you're sending out at your direction, together with his survey party, who, in the course of making a survey, finds it necessary to go upon the land of a party or parties other than the one for whom the survey is being made, is not liable for civil or criminal trespass, and is only liable for any actual damage done to the land or property. So if somebody's digging up property corners, something adjacent that's not on ours, the only thing that you're liable for is if you dug a hole up and you didn't replace it adequately enough. But as far as crossing that person's property to get to those points, we have this statute, we have this right, and it's not a right to just basically do anything willy-nilly. It's with the intent of going to those property places to go to anything on that property that will help with the determination of boundary rights, property rights, and nothing else. Where some people want to hang this up on, and it's a little bit loose here, I'll be honest with you, is the counties that require 25 and 50-foot overlap on development surveys and topos. Once again, that's just a matter of, I mean, I see it, and what I would rather do, rather than hang my hat on this statute and say, darn it, I have the right, I can go across there if I want to do this topo because I'm a land surveyor. I would rather knock on the door and tell somebody I'm there doing a land survey, whether I'm doing the property line, whether I'm doing topo, whatever, isn't any consequence to them. Just the fact that they know I'm there doing a survey for something that's going to affect the adjacent, let them know. Bottom line, let them know. Because I'd hate for this thing to get in a horrible, horrible screaming match over somebody's determination on whether that means boundary only, topographic only, whether that's anything survey duty related. Because where this has also now come about with technology is UAVs. Do you have the right to fly over these people's property because it's in the course of a survey? I'd be careful. Myself, I'd be careful because there are federal laws, not so much even in just the elevation of flying. There are federal laws as far as peeping Tom laws, voyeurism laws, that anything with a camera, video, that respect can be viewed as going against those laws. If it just so happens that the survey you're doing with your UAV, you need to see what's across that fence for topo, what have you, and there just happens to be the neighbor's daughter laying out there in her bikini. Like I said, you got to be careful. Yes, you can say and so I've had people say, well, Tim, what's the difference from me stepping into that backyard to do the survey and she's there as well? At least with the person physically there, you can state your intent, whether it's just to that person or to somebody in the house, a parent, what have you, whomever in charge of that house. A person can state their intent. a UAV flying overhead isn't flashing big neon signs saying, oh, hey, by the way, I'm doing a survey, so don't mind this camera, even though you're doing whatever you're doing in your backyard. That's not the case. So there are people that want to take this statute, this section, and go, yep, I'm going to apply it to my surveying with my UAV. Be careful. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying be careful. If you see something that could cross a line, don't cross that line. That's my plea to you. Okay, Illinois Administrative Procedure Act. Bottom line is, all of this is put together to show that we're going to be in compliance of all these rules, and we'll follow them as necessary. I love the legalese that gets thrown into this stuff. Section 47's home rule that, hey, if a municipality is regulated by home rule and has something that's more restrictive, that can apply. That can apply. Oh, I'm sorry, cannot apply. Sorry, not apply. Those are other things as far as municipal development. Home rule does not qualify for surveying and professional services. Everything in the professional services sections, surveying, engineering, architecture, are exempt from home rule. And the last one is funds and appropriations. All this stuff, all the money is going to the department. The revision is the financial and professional regulation that's happened since then. So that's the end of the sections themselves. Oh, I'm sorry, one more. You can be audited if you don't do all your continuing education. They can check you out and whatever, so they do have that right. 49, bottom line is they have the right to create new laws, and they will stay in effect until they update them. So that's the long and short of it. Okay, so kind of wrapping this all together, we've got a little over 20 minutes left. And like I said, I wanted to leave a little question and answer questions I had for the attendees as well. And hopefully get some feedback from other states, because there's some things that we're looking to do maybe differently in Illinois. I would love to have the input from other states. Excuse me. So bottom line, how does this affect me? How does this affect my survey? What do I need to change, if anything? I mean, if you've gone through this and go, I do that, I do that, I do that, I do that. Perfect. My job here is done. You listen to me kind of blah, blah, blah on for 3.5 hours that it is what it is. But there are things that have changed. And whether you know about them or not, there are things that change, and these are what they are. And there's some things we've had to go a little more specific on as far as original surveys, retracement surveys, boundary law principles, keeping in mind, like I said earlier, that if anything ever goes to court, these are the statutes, these are the rules and the facts that a prosecutor or defense attorney is going to test you on. What are you? Do you do these things? Are you aware of these things? Were you providing an original survey, or you were providing a retracement survey? What applicable boundary law principles did you use? What case law did you use? Was there acquiescence? Was there any adverse possession? Was there a boundary line agreement? What did you find that was ambiguous in the adjoining deeds? It's all of these things. That's applicable boundary law principles, and that's the things that we need to make sure that we stay on top of, because there will be times when in this litigious world that just keeps getting worse and worse, that you're going to be questioned about these things, and we need to have good answers and be viewed as that professional giving those answers. Item number 2, the revisions to the practice of surveying. There are some things that we needed to tighten up. Where we are still changing rapidly with our technology. That's something that we talked about in putting this together, going back into the practices and definitions and practices. We really want to put something in there about UAV use, but UAV use is just a technology. It's just another way to collect data, in the same way that GPS was, laser scanning is, LiDAR is. We're going to have all of these different technologies coming forward. Those are just the tools in the toolbox. How we deal with that data, how we deal with that point and elevation and place in time, what we do with that data, that's what's going to determine how professional we are, how we've collected it, what manners, what methodologies, what precisions, what accuracies, and how we relate it to boundary issues. That's what's going to determine our professionalism. So that's why we stayed away from UAV and really addressing any kind of technology. That's why when it came to the photogrammetry, whether it's done by UAV or conventional plane or by satellite, anything aerial, who knows what's next. We stayed away from that, other than ASPRS certification. Because there will be, hopefully, and maybe there's some people here on this webinar that are licensed as a photogrammetrist in other states. We haven't gotten that far yet. Is it possible? Yes. We'll get into those questions and answers here in a little bit. But I think those are the things that we needed to tighten up into practice, in the revising that practice. Tightening up some of the things on what we do as far as topography and what we're allowing. Tightening up some things that we're doing as a professional, the consultation. I can't imagine an expert witness, somebody giving expert testimony as an expert witness in a court on land surveying. That's not a land surveyor. I can't imagine it. So hopefully, by including some of the consultation and those revisions, that's something that we can tighten up and say, that's in our camp, that is ours. Number 3, we broaden the education requirement for licensure. I think we're going to have to, and I don't think we're done. And we'll get, that's the big part of my conversation here in just a little bit as far as question and answers. I want to talk about that in a little bit. But we had to broaden it even now with this revision to open that door just a little bit more for licensure. To be completely honest, yes, I am concerned about licensure and the number of licenses with some sort of succession plan, because we're going to have, like I said earlier, a bunch of baby boomers that are going to sunset here. In the next 5 to 10 years, we could lose, depending on estimates, 25 to 40% of our licensed land surveyors in the next 10 years due to age and retirement. So we do need to have a way to be able to get those land surveyors back in, the licensed land surveyors. My bigger concern is the technicians. And I got to believe that everybody on this call is seeing it, feeling it, both field and office. And unfortunately, we're to the point now, and I'm seeing it throughout the Chicago area. People are hiring warm bodies, and it's not doing us any good. There needs to be some education. There needs to be some opportunities to train, to provide some guidance. None of us have time really to mentor and train like we should, like we were mentored. We've got to be able to do that. So while this was a step in one direction to broaden the education, we've got other things we need to do as well. This also paves the way for changes in the administrative rules as well. Number 4, a couple of things that were going to come up. We talked about amending and filing certificates of correction. That's going to get worked on a little bit better. And hopefully that's going to we'll get more definitive on what is allowed by a certificate of correction. It's very, very like I said, misused in Illinois for what it does. So hopefully that's something that we're going to be able to define and do a little bit better with. And then administratively, I think hopefully we'll help with the definition of related sciences. We'll get that a little bit better figured out and worked on, and hopefully that'll continue as well.
Hey, Tim, we've got a few questions.
Yes, let's go ahead and roll through them.
First one, are the changes to the administrative rules complete, and if so, are they available now?
Those changes are not complete. They're still going through some I won't say last minute revisions. The goal is to have those done by the end of the year. Tell you what, for those who don't know, let's through the Illinois General Assembly.gov, there is the administrative rules that you can go through. These are the ones that are in as far as law right now, rules and law right now. Yes, we're going to update several of these, updating the minimum standards of practice, 1270-56. Like I said, we're looking at the related sciences. We're actually going to insert a couple of sections in here. I believe it's going to be 1270-14 is going to be certificate of correction. I think I can't remember exactly which, but no, those are being worked on. As soon as they are done, approved. Actually, what they've got to do is they've got to go to the department. Then they go out for public review for 45 days, and hopefully that's going to happen right after the first of the year. We'll let everybody know about that to look at those, make recommendations, make your comments on them. Yay, nay, whatever. The more comments, the better. That way that the department sees that people are looking at them, they're interested in them, and making good, reasonable comments. So as those things come out, we will blast everything to as many members as we've got on email lists to make sure that they go out and look at these administrative rules.
Okay, and our last one. Is there any talk about moving to associate degrees with the 24-hour requirements?
That's a great question, and that kind of leads me into the last section here, and I'm hoping people are close enough to their computers they can hopefully answer, and this is the question and answer I have for them as well. Here's what my take on this is and where it needs to go. And I think Illinois, we're behind in several states. We're ahead of a lot of other states, but bottom line, we got to figure out what works for us. Right now, we have 3 schools that offer land surveying curriculums in Illinois. The Parkland 24-hour courses in Champaign. We've got SIU Edwardsville through the construction management, I think, through the construction department, and then Northern Illinois University is through the geography department. Parkland is the only one that's part-time, online and weekend labs. I'm afraid we're going to have to do more of those types of things. Part of what I think we're needing to look at is exactly what the question was in regarding is what would we allow for the associate degree? And the problem is I'm wondering where this also goes in concert with the survey intern 4-year degree. But the conversations I've been having with people are, let's be realistic. 90% of our land surveying profession, our land surveying community, are boundary surveyors. And let's say 70% of those are the small lot survey firms, the mom and pop type survey firms, lot surveys, small topos, small things that, let's be honest, a lot of us, including myself, came up through the ranks without a degree and cut their teeth on early with small surveys, topos, plats, some subdivisions, nothing too complicated, and with the right education, right on the job education, with the right technical training, can do this. I think we need to create a tiered system of land surveying licenses. That one would be a boundary surveyor, for lack of a better term. This terminology can kind of come and go. We can figure out something, but that would be probably an associate degree, and depending on how many credit hours of land surveying classes we want to talk about, and then a couple of years experience. I'm thinking a 2-year degree, including 12 hours of boundary classes, and then 2 years of experience or 4 years of experience, all that to be determined. That would give somebody the ability to perform and sign a boundary survey, a lot survey, a small topographic survey. Nothing too complicated. I think from there, I think we can get into other specifics. If there are others that are more photogrammetry related or hydrographic, something that's a little more technical that might not necessarily need all the boundary experience, that I think we could come up with some sort of technical surveyor that would require a 2-year degree, specific land surveying classes, and then so many hours of or so many years of experience, 2, 4, whatever it may be. I think there could be 2 or 3 of these minor licenses, and then not to shut off the 4-year degree program. Absolutely not. Someone going through the 4-year degree program would basically get the land surveyor license that would entitle that person to do all of those tasks, and would also then allow them to also to provide expert testimony. I hate to go as far as say that the licensed land surveyor could do land title surveys, but that'd be the, to me, in my mind, would be the one to be most appropriate to do a land title survey with that much more background versus just a lot survey. That's just a way to go. I know there are other states that have tiered licenses like that. I'm throwing it back to the webinar attendees. If you've got, please tell me where you're from. If you've got a tiered system, if something works, if it doesn't work, if you don't feel like doing it now, grab my email that to me. This is something I think that it needs to catch fire, and we need to be able to do this and be able to push this into vocational schools, more technical schools, community colleges, something where we can keep the survey technician and the lot surveyor, that portion, a big portion of our profession, alive and well, and still have the higher education people, the people that want to go to work at NGS, and the people that want to do the high-end stuff. And yes, you would still go to college and get the degree, get the business side, get the higher education side of stuff, but still have an avenue for somebody that's doesn't necessarily maybe has the capability to go to 4 years, but doesn't have the drive to go for 4 years to then do lot surveys. But we need those people. We need to have that. We need to have that ability, both inside and out, to be able to incorporate some drafting at the vocational side, at the community college side. So I'm curious to hear. Please share one way or another, either today or by email. Let me know your thoughts on what your state does, and where we could go because what I would like to do is I would like to see this, because this is whatever comes about. I would like to see this as almost set up as a national standard eventually. Yes, it's going to have to go back in front of NCAAS. Bottom line is they're going to start losing money on test takers because we're losing numbers of graduates. But if we could up the number of test takers based upon the level of competency we need, which are the everyday surveyors, I mean, that's what we need to do. So I would love to get your feedback. I mean, that's why we're here talking today. Is yes, this is statutes and standards, but this is a give and take. If we've got some, I don't know, do we have any takers yet?
We've had a couple comments come in from someone. They say, the education is great, however, the conveyance of sound surveying practices relating to research, recon, boundary analysis, and consulting is what we need. If this can be addressed at the education level, great. However, I don't think it's getting done on the job. Furthermore, he continues to say, you are going to run into issues when you use words like small topos or small boundaries.
True. And that's where it's going to be hard to differentiate between a small job and a big job. I guess it's going to be the level of competency required to do whatever that job is. And that's part of the reason that, and completely agree with the comments, that if we can create, and Todd Horton is a big proponent of this down at the Parkland program, we need to create some apprenticeship type situations where it is on the job training in addition to the education. So yes, it's one thing to sit and talk about boundary principles, boundary law, boundary analysis in a class. It's another thing to be part of a program where you're an apprentice under the direction of a surveyor, doing this stuff on real world projects, doing this stuff on real world boundaries, the way it used to be done, the way most of us came up through the ranks before the education requirement. So yes, completely agree. When you say small, I'm thinking more minor in tasks versus the size of the job, the complication of the tasks.
Okay, we've got someone here from Illinois. I think that a tiering system is a poor idea. The delineation of those lines would get extremely messy. Additionally, this would prevent smaller firms from growing by pigeonholing them into only a specific type of survey. This would also cement in the larger firms and prevent future competition.
That's fine. Okay, I've heard why it doesn't work. Please help us figure out what does work. I'll throw ideas against the wall to try to help something, but yeah, we need to be able to come up with ideas to help us sustain. I can agree with the idea. Yes, I agree with the whole answers of why it won't work. We need to figure out how to either revise that and make something work, or come up with something else different. Don't just say it doesn't work. So that'd be my only rebuttal.
We have another comment. Many skilled professions use labor union to train and find employment for their members. If not for the bad reputation of corruption of unions, I think it would be an excellent path for surveyors of varying abilities.
Yes, actually, the New York State uses the CST program for their education of all of their technicians, inside and out. Welcome to Chicago, welcome to Illinois, welcome to corruption. So you've got that. Not to go off on the political side, but if we let the unions into all of this right here, right now, the cost of everything just went up by probably 20 or 30% at least. And it's just one of those things that for what? We're not getting anything out of it other than padding somebody's pensions. I would love to be able to reach some sort of agreement with them, and yes, but bottom line is they don't have the educational opportunities. NSPS does. We need to make more of them, not just Illinois, but everywhere. We need to make, yeah, we need to figure out how to make it all work together. Otherwise, we're just going to sit here and watch everything just falling to our demise.
Last comment so far, someone says, a very good idea, but my fear is that segmented levels of licensure would be easier to pick apart at sunset.
Could be, and the reason, I'll tell you what, and just so everybody knows the reason that's strictly my idea. To be honest with you, this has been my idea. Might be not, I may not be talking exactly apples and oranges here, but I look at the medical field. I look at nursing. You have LPNs, you have registered nurses, you have physician's assistants, you have doctors. There are different levels depending on different educational opportunities and different bodies of knowledge. Is there a big segregation between LPNs and RNs? And maybe there is a bigger divide there than I know of, because I'm not involved in that profession whatsoever. But I do see other professions that can have tiering dependent on the tasks that are at hand. So keeping that in mind, like I said, just trying to come up with some ideas. Otherwise, we're registering 5 or 6 licensees a year, versus we used to do 100. We need to do something, and with the rapid decline of our numbers through the baby boomers in the next 10 years, got to have something, and we also got to have something for the technicians. So all great comments, all great ideas. Like I said, I'm open to anything. That's the reason I wanted to like turning this around and asking the questions as well.
All right, that's all we have for now.
And we are at 10 till 12. So technically we've made it through our 3 hours and 20 minutes of continuing education for 4 hours. So unless anybody has any other questions, comments, thoughts, I'm good with wrapping it up.
Okay, we've had one more comment come in. Unfortunately, surveying is looked at as a trade. If we can't stand in front of high school students next to a civil engineer and hold our own when it comes to our profession, worth and importance to society, it is going to continue to get harder to keep the profession alive.
Agreed. Sat through 2 different workforce development meetings at the chapter level over the past 6 weeks, and a lot of great ideas, a lot of great energy in the meetings, and then we get up and we walk out of the meetings and then nobody does anything. We are our own enemy. You're right. We can't, there's very few of us that will stand up in front of a class with our equipment, with our toys, talk about everything that surveying has been for us. What kind of an experience beyond just a job it's been for us. But everybody's busy, everybody's tired, everybody's got other things to do. Nobody else is going to do it for us. And yes, we're not as sexy as engineers or architects or doctors or lawyers. It's in our hands. We've got to decide what we want to do with it. So, but good comment.
And I'd just like to kind of add a comment on top of that. IPLSA maintains regular communications with the School Counselors Association, and we regularly promote our resources on our website towards students and scholarships and things like that. One of the biggest things that we promote are that we offer resources to our land surveyors to help them go to class and, present to these students. So we do have resources that we can send you. If anyone's interested in getting involved, give me and Laura a call at the office or send us an email. We'd be happy to help you out, and we'd be happy to reach out to some school counselors in your area that are looking for a presentation. So yeah, just give us a call if that interests you. I've also had one more comment come through. If everyone has time, I'll go ahead and read it.
Sure.
When I visit high school students, I speak about how land surveyors are part of the same professional group as engineers, architects, and construction managers. So far, this new message is resonating and open doors. I've discovered that by associating land surveyors with engineering and architecture, we open doors to students who are considering those options.
Very good. And we're not against them. We're part of them. It's all part of what we do. So that's a great, to me, that's a great comment. And that should be kept in mind when we're getting ready to go talk to students, high school, college, what have you. We are part of a bigger system, and we're an important part of that. So yes, keep that in mind. Keep that happy face on, that we're the fun part of it.
Okay, so it looks like the comments are starting to slow down, so I'm just going to make a few announcements really quick. First, I know that the deadline is coming up quickly. I'll have everyone's PDA certificates emailed out by tomorrow, so keep an eye out on your email for that. If you have any questions for me, you can go ahead and email me. My email is ariana@frontlineco.com. Or you can just email or respond directly to that email you received from GoToWebinar earlier today. That will kick an email to me. Let's see, what else do I need to announce? Yeah, if you didn't see the handouts, there is a handout available for download. It's in the handout section of your taskbar. So go ahead and download that right now because it won't be available once I end the webinar. Or, of course, you can just email me and I'll send it to you directly. I think that's pretty much it. So thank you again, Tim, for a great presentation. Thanks for everyone who joined us today.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. I'm sorry, Ariana, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or Tim. That's all I have. So unless Tim has anything he wants to add, have a good weekend and happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, thank you to everyone, and yeah, enjoy your Turkey Day. Have a good one.
Take care, everyone.